Hello everyone. This is the second part of my two-part video series looking at Alek Minassian's mental health reports. This video is about the reports by the Crown experts Dr. Scott Woodside, Dr. Percy Wright, and Angeli Boudreau. My first video was about the defense experts and the link for it is in the description. If you want to read these reports for yourself, there's a link for them in the description as well. Before I begin, YouTube strikes a lot of videos related to incels and mass murder, so I have to give you a disclaimer so they won't do that here. This video is for educational and research purposes and is not in any way an endorsement of Alek Minassian's beliefs or actions. I do not support what Alek Minassian did in any way, and neither should anyone else. Mass murder is bad, and misogyny is bad. Don't be a mass murderer or a misogynist. Okay, here's Dr. Woodside's report. I didn't like how long my last video was, so I've chosen to highlight parts of it, and hopefully that'll make it easier to go over. Okay, so you can see here that he actually downloaded Elliot Rodger's manifesto, My Twisted World, and read it, which, as far as I'm aware, the people who did the defense reports didn't. They didn't really seem to have much background knowledge on incels from what I saw. They kept calling it the incel rebellion movement and things like that, and talking about how Chads and Stacys are part of incel philosophy, and just the things that kind of suggest they didn't really know that much about it necessarily. And you can see here that Woodside has actually read this manifesto that Minassian said he was reading all the time and was obsessed with. So that was a good thing to do. So he mentions the two other people who did reports, Angeli Boudreau and Dr. Wright. He put them in his appendix, but the appendix isn't in this document. So what I'm going to do is when we get to the point where he references them, I'll jump to Wright's report and Boudreau's report and come back to this one, kind of like I did with Bradford. Okay, so he met with him in October and November of 2019. So yeah, about a year after the initial reports for the defense. So this is interesting right here. Minassian was well aware of the nature of the assessment and of the consequences of being found NCR. He stated he had always assumed it would be better to be in hospital than in jail. So yeah, one thing I wondered ever since I found out he was going for an NCR defense was that, well, he would have had to approve it. His lawyer would have had to have discussed it with him. And so, like, did he think that was just or that was right? Did he understand what NCR was? Well, and this is kind of really the only indication of any of that, this little paragraph right here. So he knew what NCR was, and, it's better to be in a hospital than in a jail, so might as well go for it. So this kind of suggests that, he's just doing it because he wants to be in a nicer environment, not because, he thinks it's right or he thinks he actually wasn't criminally responsible or anything like that. So yeah, this is really all we have on that front. Doesn't really make him look good. Okay, so he has been in protective custody throughout his stay in jail. He noted that during his brief encounters with other inmates, they shouted at him, which included insults and banging noises. Yeah, so he's in protective custody by himself. Other inmates don't particularly like him for some reason. I wonder why. Yeah, some more stuff about his childhood and his issues, and there's a lot of overlap between these reports and the defense reports. So, okay. Mr. Minassian reported receiving visits from his parents and his brother at least once a week. When asked about the impact of his charges on his family, he said, "They never really talk about that, but the first few visits I could see the look of sadness on their faces." He was not aware of any other way his actions had affected them. Okay, so here we're seeing what we saw before. It's like he notices they're sad, but he can't talk about any more profound way in which they're upset by what happened. So this part here is interesting, talking about the impact of his actions on his family. I put those thoughts aside because I really wanted to go through with it, because I was nervous about starting the job and screwing it up, and I wanted the recognition to be tied specifically to the incel movement. I wanted the notoriety, not only for the killings, but I upgraded it by being associated with the group. If I went out and killed people without any reason, then I'm just an average mass killer. But if I say something on a large social network platform, then I tie myself into some other big-time names, increase my fame and infamy regarding the killing. So yeah, this is a little bit damning. Like he knew it would harm his family, but he just really wanted to do it. My parents might be upset if I do that, but I really want to kill people. Yeah, so I mentioned in my last video that, the crowns and defenses will often get experts that are favorable to their case. And Yeah, much like with the adversarial system as a whole, it's useful to have people making their, best possible cases for why he's guilty and for why he's not. And so, yeah, if you get experts that are going to be more favorable to the Crown's case, they might interrogate them to a degree that, the defense won't, or get things out of them that they won't. So it's useful. And so, yeah, we'll see later that Woodside kind of goes into more detail about a lot of things about, why he did certain things or what his state of mind was that the other doctors didn't get. And yeah, so it's like, this kind of says more about how he understood what his actions would do. I knew it would hurt my parents, but I just wanted to do it, man. Okay, this is about him being bullied. It actually mentions physical bullying, which we didn't see before, between grade 1 and 3. Also verbally bullied, being called names and asked to do silly acts. For example, they would tell him to stand up and hump the wall, which he would do. He stated that he would do this both because he was scared to say no and also because he wanted the attention. It was better to have negative attention than for people to ignore me. He acknowledged that this was similar in some ways to his index offense, killing people to gain attention even if negative. Okay, so he's made that connection in retrospect. And yeah, we're seeing more about how the fact that he, did what the bullies wanted and didn't fight back or anything like that was because he was scared, not just because he wanted attention. And so it kind of made me wonder, which of these came first? I'm scared to do anything back, so, might as well do what I can to turn this around since I'm not going to do anything, turn it into attention, or, maybe the attention part came first, oh yeah, I just want attention, but, also I'm a little scared, I'm guessing the fear kind of came first, and that there was kind of a learned helplessness there, and then he was just like, oh yeah, might as well get attention. But yeah, he's insightful enough to know that this is similar to what he did as an adult, 20 years later. Yeah. Okay, so this part here, again, he's talking about how he started getting interested in mass shootings. When he's feeling depressed, he would look them up about once per month. So before we had once every 3 to 5 months, now it's once per month. He noted that he began to fantasize about doing a school shooting in the last 2 years of high school, but never took any steps. He thought about getting back at 2 people who had teased him, and also liked the idea of the tension it would cause at school and the notoriety he would receive. Mr. Minassian stated that he never went through with it because he did not know how to illegally obtain a gun, and also did not have the will to do it at the time. Yeah, so that goes to show that he kind of did want revenge on the bullies. There were specific people he wanted to get, and the only reason he didn't do it was he just didn't know how, and didn't really have the balls to do it. I'm assuming that's what this part means here. Did not have the will to do it. Yeah, I mean that could mean multiple things, but yeah. So now what we're getting is, well, would have done it, but didn't know how to get a gun, and didn't really feel like it. So. Yeah, we saw Westfall mentioned earlier. Oh, why didn't he get revenge on the bullies? And it's like, well, I mean, we can trust what he's saying here. Then, yeah, he wanted to. He just didn't know how and didn't have the will. Okay, this is more about his odd behaviors. These are kind of strange. In adolescence, he noted the presence of some behaviors, including shifting his arm forward an even amount of times in multiples of 4 to get rid of some dirt or germs inside me. He also reported slowly letting spit come out of his mouth often throughout the day, once every 10 minutes, from grade 11 onwards, including in class. Sometimes he would spit on his clothes, leaving a wet spot. He noted he would be feeling as though he had something in his mouth, for example, a rock. He also recalled repeatedly bending his right middle finger in grade 10 to 12, leading to a callus on his palm. I just had to do it. As well, he reported repeatedly clearing his throat loudly for up to 20 minutes, mainly in grade 8 to 9. He was told he had to stop and was able to switch to other tics. Denied any other vocal tics. Yeah, this stuff looks quite embarrassing and debilitating. If it hadn't been for the fact that, this guy killed 11 people, I would have actually felt quite sorry for him. He's 17 and older, maybe even in college for all I know here, and he's spitting on himself and randomly moving his middle finger around in the middle of class and stuff like that. It's sad, but he killed 11 people. My sympathy is mostly gone now. Okay. He stated he first became aware of other children reacting negatively when he did something antisocial, picking my nose or said something odd with realizing it. He became aware of this at age 7 while in grade 2. Yeah, I can relate to that. There's actually kind of a moment when I was a little kid where I remember that. I was just like picking my nose in the middle of class, and some girl who was like, ew, ew, ew. And I was like, oh shit, other people can see me. How about that? Like, I don't know. It sounds weird, but that had like never occurred to me before that. So, yeah, I guess the same thing happened to him. His family described bizarre behaviors later on, including licking the table and spitting on walls at night in the home and while at school. Mr. Minassian was also noted to be fearful of women, both in the community and at school. Yes, there's the spitting on the wall. Licking the table, we haven't heard that before. Not just scared of female waitresses, but also everywhere. I guess this family said more about that. So this is more about giant steps and all that stuff. Mr. Minassian was never placed in behavioral classes. He once received a one-day suspension from an after-school daycare in grade 3. He was 8 years old at the time. He indicated he was randomly shouting out swear words. He was never expelled. Yeah. Again, relatable. I remember when I first learned about swearing, I was fascinated. Like, hey, there are these words you can say that make everybody freak out. That's so cool. It's like magic, So go around, fuck, and yeah. Eventually, I stopped doing that. But Mr. Minassian described both good and bad aspects of school. He enjoyed getting to choose courses in high school. The negative aspects were the stress of homework, assignments, and tests. He was also teased in high school when he acted goofy. He described how he always used a silly voice rather than his normal voice. It was kind of a mask I was putting on. They make fun of me anyway, so make fun of the facade rather than the real me. He would also say silly stuff, which included repeatedly stating 80 plus 80 equals 55, using a high voice and a horse laugh. Some of this was just to get attention. Yes, I was kind of like theorizing about this part. He touched on it a little bit, but now, yeah, he's saying it more explicitly. And I'd like to know what he thinks a horse laugh is. Like, how does a horse laugh? Yeah, so Woodside goes into more detail about those essays he wrote for school. Yeah, Westfall kind of mentioned them briefly, and we saw the list of them in his appendix. We couldn't see what they were, so he's going to talk a bit about that, which is interesting. Several essays dealt with ethical issues such as stealing, breaking someone's windshield, should parents have the right to spank their children, friends using drugs, cheating in high school, and murder is wrong. Some of these clearly demonstrate his ability to consider the wrongfulness of one's actions, for example, stealing, and the potential consequences for that individual. In one essay, Murder or Self-Defense, Minassian provided a detailed understanding and analysis of a Supreme Court of Canada decision and various legal concepts, for example, the right to remain silent and not incriminate yourself. In another, Mr. Minassian wrote about the rights of an accused. He also wrote an essay exploring provocation and automatism in a murder trial. Westfall's report mentioned that he kind of just, had to help and copied the textbook and repeated a lot of things. And maybe that's true. But yeah, like an interesting thing about that is, you can, learn what all the right answers are for assignments like this. Like, this is the correct legal principle to apply here. This is what people say about why this is wrong. And you can like repeat all that stuff without having any actual understanding of what you're saying. And yeah, that's a problem for kids in school. They often learn to just memorize things and, here's the right answer on this test and here's the right answer. And you can do that without actually knowing what you're doing. And so you can get quite far at school, even if you're a complete idiot, basically, and you don't understand that much about what you're doing. You've just learned, these are the right answers. And so, yeah, so one might think, oh yeah, he's writing essays about, murder and self-defense and stuff. He understands, why this stuff is wrong, but I don't think that's necessarily the case. And yeah, again, the appendix isn't here, so we can't actually see any of these assignments, unfortunately. So I still don't have them for you. Maybe someone will come up with them eventually. Okay. Mr. Minassian never dated in high school or thereafter. He did ask a woman out in college after meeting in the library. They went for a walk the next day, but then she stopped responding to his texts and emails. He reported feeling disappointed and sad. He asked another 2 women out, but was rejected each time. Mr. Minassian denied engaging in any significant stalking behavior beyond Googling the first woman's name. So he's changed his story from, I believe it was Westfall's report, before he said the only time he ever asked a woman out was, a girl at the library with her head down, and she said no. But now he's saying that she did go out with him, and they went for a walk, and he asked other people out too. Yeah, so I mean, my gut feeling here is that given how low functioning Minassian was, I'm inclined to think the first story is more likely, but he's talking about Googling the first woman's name. Yeah, okay, so like, yeah, I don't know here. Again, it's hard to know when he's telling the truth and when he's not. Mr. Minassian denied any specific focus on any women while in college. He did have crushes on 2 girls in high school, fantasizing about having sex with them. He once again denied taking any active steps to stalk them or find out more about them. He did recall later opening a Facebook account in college, in part to look up their names. He did not find that much interesting. Okay, so I mean, that's not necessarily a bad thing, I think. Lots of people go on Facebook and look up what their old classmates were doing, but yeah, I don't know. And here we have a redaction. Mr. Minassian identified himself as heterosexual. So we know at least one of the redactions about his sexual history is him looking at pee porn. I assumed it was Westfall's report, that big redacted section from last video, but maybe it's this one. Mr. Minassian identified as heterosexual and talked about his pee porn addiction, and yeah, I don't know. The one thing I wondered about that was was it just like women peeing, or was it women peeing on men? Was it men peeing on women? I feel which of those it was would change my view of him, but perhaps we will never know. Mr. Minassian attributed his lack of success with partners to his being shy and having difficulty beginning conversations. He noted he went on websites, Forever Alone and Reddit, that complained negatively about women to make himself feel better. For example, that women were slutty or only went after guys with money or a six-pack. However, he knew this was not the whole story about why some men were not successful, but it helped him to forget that it took effort on his part to be in a relationship. Right. So this part is quite important, I think. So he's going on these websites that say hateful things, but like he knows what they're saying isn't all there is to it. Like he knows he has problems that are making women not want to go out with them, and so he's kind of acknowledging here, it seems, that this is a coping mechanism. It makes him feel better because he can pretend that no, it's not me. It's because they're all sluts. They're all this and they're all that. Someone like Elliot Rodger wouldn't have had the level of self-awareness to be able to say that. He bought into the explanations wholeheartedly. Women are just bad, women are evil, and that's why they're rejecting me. But Minassian, if you read the stuff he says in the earlier reports, he knew he had a problem. He knew he had autism. He knew that was played a role in why people didn't want to be around him, and so. Westfall was going on about him being, indoctrinated by this stuff. And here he's saying, I know it's not the whole story. It just, it helped me forget that, it was because of me, Okay, so he's stating that the reason he was not in a relationship was because he had no one with whom to hang out. Reference being shy and having difficulty initiating conversation. So, the first thing he says of, why are you not in a relationship is not, oh, women are horrible. It's just, well, I have these issues. So that kind of supports that conclusion. And Mr. Minassian denied any strong feelings of anger or hatred towards women, despite spending time on sites that strongly expressed these sentiments. I was annoyed at them, but there was no full-fledged rage towards women in general. Mr. Minassian stated he only began thinking about having a girlfriend in college for romantic and sexual purposes. Romance would involve holding hands, being affectionate, walking in the park, touching her hair. Sex would involve vaginal, oral, and anal intercourse. He stated that he had no real preference among these acts. Then he looked at pee porn. So this is kind of weird here. Vaginal, oral, anal, no real preference. As long as there's a hole to put it in. This is what happens when you watch too much porn, I guess. It kind of all becomes the same. He stated that he never thought about marriage or children. Well, I guess that kind of perhaps says quite a bit about how optimistic he was about those things happening, or maybe he just didn't care. When asked about his own views regarding women, Mr. Minassian stated once he began going to sites such as Forever Alone, Incel, and The Red Pill, yes, there's a site called Incel, and he goes there. He enjoyed reading the comments there and would read them over multiple times. He indicated he enjoyed reading the very negative comments about women, describing it as relieving to have some kind of explanation for why women weren't having relationships with men. Mr. Minassian stated he did enjoy reading the mean, hate-filled comments toward women. The people who had once shortchanged me were being put down. He had stated that he first discovered these sites at age 22 in 2015 when he was in college. Yes, that's making him seem more Elliot Rodger. They shortchanged him by not going out with him. They should have, but they didn't. So, So I guess like, yeah, he was aware he had problems, but was also kind of buying into this stuff a little bit. Yeah. And then, so yeah, this paragraph here, like I think it kind of touches upon why, a lot of the stuff on these websites appeals to lonely young men. Because, if you have autism, or if you're, just socially awkward in general, and, it's like, women are rejecting me and I don't know what I'm doing wrong. Or, I'm going on a dating site and I get like no matches at all. What am I doing wrong? It's like, you don't know. No one tells you. No one's going to tell you why. No one's going to sit down with you and go into the great detail about, why they've rejected you, why they don't want to talk to you. They're just going to do it. Right. And so it's, and that's one of the niche that, sites like this fill. They provide an explanation, whereas otherwise you don't really have one. An explanation, a group of people to be a part of, which you might otherwise not have. It's kind of like a cult in that sense, if I'm being honest. Yeah, and I don't know, like because on the one hand he has self-awareness here, but on the other hand, like the fact that he enjoys reading these hateful comments about all women kind of would seem to imply that he's generalized his negative experiences with women in school laughing at him or not going out with them to all women. They're all like that. And so yeah, seeing them put down is great. The people who had once shortchanged me, well, like all women didn't shortchange you. A few of them did. But he's looking at it in this way. So this is kind of a revealing thing about how he had come to think. One that suggests that, yeah, maybe he was a misogynist at that point. When viewing the websites in college, Mr. Minassian noted he kept this private, knowing that others would not like this, both men and women, and they might stop talking to him. Mr. Minassian stated that when reading the websites, he was thinking about women in the abstract. Right, so I was kind of speculating about this before, but now he's like, yeah, I know people aren't going to like it. I know people are going to think it's horrible, but I'm going to do it anyway. Just not going to tell them. And yeah, thinking about women in the abstract. So, right. When asked if he thought of himself as misogynistic, he was aware of the meaning of the term. Mr. Minassian stated that he never thought he was either misogynistic or not. He did report being annoyed by the fact that he could not form a relationship with the woman, but denied being aware of any strong feelings of anger or rage directed at women in general. Yeah, like should we believe this? Like, if he's enjoying reading all these expressions of anger or rage at women and being like, yeah, that makes me feel better. Like, yeah, he's annoyed by the fact that he can't have a relationship with the woman to the point where, he's going out and reading all this misogynistic stuff to make him feel better. But I'm not a misogynist. I don't have any strong feelings on this matter. I may have gone out and tried to kill a whole bunch of them, but no strong feelings. Yeah, I'm not sure I believe that. When asked if he would have postponed his attack had a woman shown interest in him, Mr. Minassian thought he might have postponed it for a while. He stated if he had been in a relationship and it was going well, he might not have wanted to complete his attack. However, if it was not going well, he lost his job or things were otherwise not going well, he would have most likely gone forward with the attack. So this is the thing everybody wonders about incel mass murderers. If there'd just been, one brave soul who slept with them, would they have still killed people? And well, he's openly saying, well, I would have just postponed it, and if she broke up with me or something happened I didn't like, I would have gone on the attack anyway. Yeah, there's this kind of this idea in our culture that you can, a woman can, redeem a bad man with, the power of her love and stuff like that. It's something you see in like, Beauty and the Beast and, fairy tales and, a lot of other things in our culture. Just if you just love this person, he'll get better. And, it's like, well, not necessarily, like a lot of people who are married to domestic abusers have that idea and it just really doesn't work out for them. So, should is the solution to inceldom for just women to all sleep with them? Well, I mean, I think that'll fix things for some of them, but, Elliot Rodger, probably not. I mean, this guy, well, is openly saying, well, yeah, I would have just postponed my attack, As soon as she broke up with me, I'm getting out of the van again, and maybe would have run over her too. I don't know. When asked to ascribe percentages to motivations for the attack, Mr. Minassian estimated 35% related to anger at women, 30% related to screwing up socially or performance-wise at work, and 30% not wanting to rot in obscurity, and 5% just wanting to do something like this anyway. Mr. Minassian noted he had intermittently thought about doing something like this for so long that not doing it would feel like backing out. I would have felt like quitting, that I didn't have the courage. Yeah. So, yeah, I'm not a misogynist. I'm not angry at women, but, the reason I killed 11 people, 9 of whom were women, was, 30% related to the fact that I'm angry at women, But yeah, I'm not angry at women. No, definitely not. And again, like, he's changing his story with regards to what his motivations are. So, like, yeah, again, like, I'm saying all this stuff about him, like, who the hell knows what's actually true, but, like, the story he's telling this guy isn't consistent. And he's managed to kind of get that out of him. He's asking him all these pointed questions, and he's changing his story. And yeah, that's useful, but it's hard to make any definite conclusions about what goes on in his own head, because that's what this is all about. We have to figure out what's going on in his own head to determine why he did it, and his level of responsibility, and only he objectively knows that. The rest of us can kind of just speculate from what he's saying here. Mr. Minassian noted the phrase "rotten obscurity" came from Elliot Rodgers' manifesto. At the same time, he felt it reflected his feelings well, that it was better to die as a famed killer than to die and everyone forgets about me as soon as I die. Mr. Minassian indicated he did not believe in an afterlife. Despite this, he again noted there was a small part of me that wanted to do a mass killing anyway. Yes, Dr. Westphal was like, oh, he has no concept of, afterlife or anything like that. And he's just like, oh, no, I don't believe in it, whatever. When asked to reconcile his resentment with women with wanting to have a relationship with women, he noted that these were not conflicting. Mr. Minassian stated, because I wanted the relationship so badly, I was feeling upset when they did not offer a romantic or sexual relationship. He indicated that he was both disappointed about not being in a relationship and was disappointed in himself as well. When feeling resentful, Mr. Minassian stated it was more feelings of sadness than anger or wanting to do something. Okay, so like this kind of suggests that a bit more self-awareness on his part. Like, it's not just it's all the women. Part of it's me and my failure too. Again, Elliot Rodger couldn't do that. And the fact that he had that awareness kind of suggests to me that, maybe if he'd gotten the right intervention, like, early on, then someone could have helped this guy, because, like, he knew he had a problem, right? When asked about his longer-term plans, Mr. Minassian stated, I am probably going to be in prison 10 years from now. Even if I was in a mental institution, I will still be there also. I doubt I would be released. So he knows he's not getting out. More of his history that we've already gone over. Okay. A little more, though. He felt neither clonidine nor Abilify had any effect in his experience of fantasies involving school shootings. He did not feel Abilify had any other impact aside from helping with tics. Mr. Minassian noted he never disclosed his fantasies involving shooting others to anyone prior to his arrest. He never thought about seeking any psychiatric assistance regarding his fantasies, noting first that it never occurred to him, but then stating he was concerned someone might call the police and the police might put him in jail. Okay, so that's pretty revealing. So, like, the first part of this, ever since Columbine, a lot of people have had this theory that, they were on psychotropic medication and that made them do it. Like, antidepressants made them do it, or antipsychotics made them do it. So, one of the uncommon side effects of, some antidepressants is wanting to kill yourself, So, like, there's kind of been this theory floating around that, psychiatric medication can essentially cause violence or school shootings or whatever. It can make fantasies worse, violent fantasies worse, can make people more inclined to violence and stuff like that. So, he's asking him about it here, and he's just like, no, I don't think it did anything there. Yeah, and so here, like, he's going into more detail about the fact that, he hid these fantasies about shooting other people, like, because he knew they would think it was wrong. He knew that he might get arrested. And the thing about seeking psychiatric assistance, like, the fact that he said that he was concerned someone might call the police and the police might put him in jail says that, like, he thought about it and he was like, well, they'll just call the cops on me. I'm not going to do it. And, if he had gotten that help, maybe he wouldn't have done this attack. So I think this is kind of an important thing to discuss, because, like, I've seen stuff like this, on incel forums, I'd never get therapy for being an incel or having violent thoughts because they'll just arrest me and throw me in jail, and so, like, if they didn't think that, maybe we'd be in, a better place. But, like, the question there is, like, is this a valid thing for them to be concerned about? And, in all honesty, I think it actually is. Like, psychologists and psychiatrists and other mental health professionals do have a professional obligation to, warn people if they think someone's going to commit an act of violence. And it kind of comes down to like a judgment call on the part of the shrink. Do you think that this guy poses a risk to other people? Like, they don't necessarily have to explicitly say, I'm going to shoot these people. It's just like, do I think they're going to do it? So, I mean, could a shrink call the cops on you because you say, hey, I have these fantasies, and they make this judgment call if I think he's going to do it? Absolutely they can. And it's something they might do, not just because they're concerned about what you're going to do, but also for the sake of self-preservation, right? Because if you think about it, like, let's say you're a therapist, you have a client who says, I'm thinking about shooting up my school. Well, if you don't call the authorities on him because you think he's not going to do it, and then he does it, the blood will be on your hands. And then if the public finds out, oh, hey, this shrink saw this person, he told him that he was fantasizing about shooting up a school, he didn't do anything, and then he did it. Well, like, people are going to hate you. You can get sued. You could lose your license. Your whole career could be completely ruined. And so, if you're a therapist in that position, it's kind of in your own best interest to call the cops on somebody who's saying, I have these fantasies about shooting up a school, even if your judgment about this person is, well, he's probably not going to do it, but, maybe he might, maybe. I can see maybe being enough for some people, given what the stakes are, If you're wrong, you lose everything, other people die or something like that, So, like, and, if we're talking about incels specifically, well, I mean, most therapists are women. Incels are still kind of a poorly understood issue. They haven't been around for a super long time, at least, as they exist in their current form. And, most people probably don't know that much about incels other than what they've heard on the news. So, hey, you're an incel, and you go to see Mrs. Therapist, and you're like, well, I'm an incel, and have all these violent, angry thoughts. They might be like, oh my God, he's part of that misogynistic hate group where they all want to kill women. Oh my God, he's like Elliot Rodger and Alek Minassian. Oh my God, I'm calling the cops. Like that could happen. So in an ideal world, there would be a way for people having these fantasies to, to get help and so they don't do it. But like, is this a valid concern to have? Someone might call the police. Yeah. And in terms of the police might put you in jail, like, I mean, you can't be put in jail just for having thoughts in your head. But I mean, what could happen there is, you go see your therapist, you start going on in graphic detail about, about your fantasies of school shootings and all the things you want to do to all the people you don't like and all the ways that you would do it. And, they get increasingly freaked out. And, maybe at some point as you're going on about this stuff, they interpret what you're saying as like, as a direct threat, as you saying, I'm going to do this rather than, I'm thinking about doing this. You don't choose your words carefully. You're talking to someone who's getting freaked out by what you're saying. I mean, yeah, that could happen. And then, they call the cops and say, hey, he told me he's going to go shoot up his school. Okay. Cops show up. You say, hey, I didn't say that. I just said I was thinking about it. I didn't say I was going to do it. Well, all right. Yeah, who are they going to believe? Because like, the shrink is a shrink, and you're the kind of guy who needs to see a shrink. The kind of guy whose life is so messed up that you're thinking about shooting up your school. Like, who are they going to believe, right? Who's a judge going to believe? So, I mean, like, that's kind of the only way that I think this could happen is, the therapist misinterprets what you're saying, or, the police get freaked out when this person calls them about your school shooting fantasies, and, they find something to pin on you. They find some bullshit to charge with you, or they start following you around, and, if you happen to commit some minor offense, then they come and arrest you, and hey, they throw the book at you. Hey, potential mass shooter, right? So, yeah, I mean, as much as I'd like to look at, people who think this way on the incel forums and stuff like that and be like, well, you shouldn't be worried they're just going to arrest you if you say you have fantasies. Well, like, I don't know, man. I mean, and that leaves aside the whole question of, even if people get help for having these fantasies, like, are they going to be able to help them? Like, are they going to be able to understand, what drives people to have them and be able to address all the issues that are causing them? Like, I would imagine this is something most mental health professionals don't really deal with and don't really know how to deal with. So even if we get people to a point where it's like, okay, I want to get the help, like, is it actually going to work? Right. I don't know. So, yeah, so gone off on a bit of a tangent here, but this was kind of a critical point here. He thought about getting help for these fantasies he was having about mass murder, but then he didn't. It's like, I don't want them to call the cops on me. Okay. He did not see any other mental health professional after beginning college, and his parents never suggested he do so. Might have been good if they did. Okay. Since his arrest, Mr. Minassian was not aware of receiving any specific diagnosis or having been offered, suggested, or prescribed medication. He noted that he had never requested psychiatric medication, but did request Motrin on 3 separate occasions for pain feeling sick. He was not receiving any medication at the time of this assessment. Yes, one thing I was speculating about before was maybe he was hopped up on some kind of medication, and that was messing some of his answers up. But it looks like, from what he said here, he wasn't. And he would have had his notes too, I guess. So, yeah, Motrin is ibuprofen. If I had to look that up because I wasn't familiar with that particular brand name. But yeah, okay. So more about his history. Mr. Minassian reported beginning use of alcohol in his teens, a sip of beer from his father's glass, but did not drink more significantly until he reached age 19. Thereafter, he reported drinking 1 beer or glass of wine every 2 weeks. He denied any history of heavier alcohol use. He denied any history of blackouts, being sick after drinking, drinking to start the morning, or get rid of a hangover. No one ever identified his alcohol use as problematic, and he denied any dysfunction associated with the same. He has never received any treatment for alcohol or drug problems. Okay, so we can see he's changed his story here. First it was, oh yeah, I've never tried alcohol. Now it's like, oh yeah, one beer, glass of wine every 2 weeks. Okay, so this is interesting. We're going back into, why he wanted to do a mass shooting in high school. Stated that when stressed, he began thinking about doing something, intermittently going back to high school. Mr. Minassian reported having read about school shootings and stated he imagined doing the same himself at times, although he did not actually plan to complete this. When asked about his motivation at those times, he reported believing it would have certain results. I knew there would be a lot of media attention and Wikipedia, and it would be on the internet. Mr. Minassian agreed that a desire for attention/fame was one of the factors. He also noted that he was occasionally bullied in high school, not physically. He noted he would deliberately act weirdly at school, leading to others making fun of him. He still had a few friends. Mr. Minassian stated the purpose of a school shooting was to get revenge on the bullies. At the same time, he stated in his imagination he thought about shooting indiscriminately and getting a large body count. It would have felt good. Mr. Minassian noted there were websites comparing school shootings where there was higher praise/grades for those who killed more people. And so again, this is very much in the territory of the conventional school shooter. Like, yeah, I got bullied, I want to get revenge on people, and kind of suggests that he also hated everybody, given it's like, yeah, it would have felt good to kill all those people indiscriminately, Would have been famous, yeah, would have been great. When asked what prevented him from acting on these fantasies, Mr. Minassian stated he did not know how to get a gun, either legally or illegally. As well, he was still focused on future achievements, such as finishing school and going to college. So, still things left to accomplish. So, don't want to kill people just yet. So this is kind of making it seem like when he was in high school, if his life had gone to shit and he didn't feel like he could accomplish anything, he would have just done it then. Like it's tied to his feeling of being a failure, of not being able to accomplish stuff. He indicated that he was able to take his mind off of things by playing video games. He noted that some were violent, but stated he also played puzzle games and racing games. Mr. Minassian did not link the violent video games to his fantasies. So the good old did violent video games make him do it, Well, probably not. When Mr. Minassian started college at age 18, after the first 6 months, his thoughts of completing a school shooting mellowed down. He stated that no one was bullying him, he was not at school all day, and he found the courses less stressful. However, he did continue to have fantasies involving shooting people at school every 2 months or so, but much less so than while in high school, every 2 to 4 weeks. Okay, so now it's once or twice a month. He also noted that he had a fresh start and was socializing more than in high school. He stated 90% of the people in his courses had the same nerdy interests. It was more fun. So, again, it's tied to being treated badly and feeling like a failure. Okay, so his police interview. He stated the incident from 2013 where he reported being rejected by a girl at a party was actually from Elliot Rodgers' manifesto and had not happened. He also recalled telling police that he had played violent video games to get out my violent urges, but stated this was not true. He just wanted to tell the police something silly, feeling it would not matter at that point. He did not recall any other lies he told police at that point. Yeah, if that's true, then that strikes me as a rather clever lie. Like, he knew that there's this, still even now, there's this media hysteria about violent video games causing mass shootings. So he's sitting there like, oh yeah, I love playing violent video games. It's just a way to get out all my violent urges. I love playing all these games where I shoot people. Like if you want to get infamy, that's a clever thing. And so, I remember watching Runkle of the Bailey's video on this, and he was just laughing at him over that. Like, why would you say that? It's not going to help. But he didn't care about helping. He just wanted to maximize the extent to which he freaked everybody out, and didn't care about what happened to him. And in that sense, this was a smart thing to say. Yep, you're going to freak people out. You're going to get all that same media hysteria. Mr. Minassian stated that joining the military was just for a job. He did eventually and somewhat reluctantly acknowledge thinking about some cool stuff about the military, including learning about weapons. However, he denied this was part of any larger scheme to train himself for a shooting. Mm-hmm. Okay, more about the military. Okay, didn't like having to go to bed and get up at specific times. Sewing labels on his clothes. Guess he didn't like that. Yeah, fine motor skills. Okay. Okay, so this part's weird here. So Mr. Minassian spoke with his father and decided to complete his computer programming degree. He noted that he had lied to his parents about the 2 courses he failed. He disclosed this to them when registering again in December 2018. He stated his father just sighed, but did not really get angry. So, he was lying to his employers that he graduated. He was lying to his family that he completed these courses needed to graduate. So, what story did he tell them? Because you'd think that, if he had said, oh yeah, I graduated, they would have been like, oh cool, let's go to your graduation. Let's see your diploma, stuff like that. Yeah. So did he just go, oh, hey, mom and dad, I graduated. Okay, cool. We're not going to ask any more questions about that. How did that go down? It's because it kind of suggests to me that, if he's saying, oh yeah, I graduated, they didn't really care or say any stuff like that. Maybe they didn't really care what he was doing. Maybe they were just kind of leaving him to his own devices. But how do you hide something like that from, people for so long? Oh yeah, I graduated. No, I didn't. For 2 years? Yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know all the details here, but that strikes me as potentially very, very strange. Okay, so this is one thing I suspected here. Mr. Minassian began his Seneca courses in January 2018. During this time, he had heard about all these vehicle ramming incidents, mainly in Europe. He was reading about them on the internet. By March, Mr. Minassian was trying to decide if he wanted to complete a mass killing, specifically in the form of a vehicle ramming attack. He decided he wanted to do this by the end of March 2018. Right. So yeah, I remember when this attack just happened, I was thinking, oh yeah, there were all those vehicle attacks in Europe. Maybe he was inspired by that. And yeah, it looks like he was. Mr. Minassian stated he was motivated to do this because he was feeling lonely and had read Elliot Rodger's manifesto several times. He had also watched Elliot Rodger's YouTube videos several times and had been reading about other guys complaining about not having girlfriends. Some were on Reddit and some on other forums. He also noted he had been accepted for a job in March, which was to start after he finished his exams in April in software development. He reported feeling nervous about screwing up on the job, and this is my last chance. I would be completely unemployed. Mr. Minassian stated, I was worried about failing anyway and decided before I get the opportunity to screw up socially or otherwise, I will do something that will gain me notoriety. Okay, so now he's saying it's because, I was mad about not having a girlfriend. So he's kind of changing his story a bit here. And we've gotten to a point now where it's who the hell knows who the hell knows how much of what he's saying is true. I really don't. There are some common threads here, but really yeah. And again, it's that black and white thinking I mentioned in my last video. This is my last chance. I'd be completely unemployed. It's well, okay. I mean, you got your parents to support you. You're unemployed for a bit before. Well, why is that your last chance? Why do you have this idea that that's your last chance? That's going to be the end. this doesn't make logical sense when you think about it. But this kind of maybe goes a bit more to the heart of that. I don't want to screw up again. Ironically, his response to that was to screw up as much as anybody possibly can in anything, if you're a normal person, doing something like that, yeah, it's screwing up as much as possible. You're going to be in jail, unemployed forever until you die. How can you possibly screw up more than that? If you're worried about screwing up, that doesn't really make sense in that sense. But again, it gives him that control, I suppose, Instead of screwing up and being, laughed at or treated badly because of who I am, I can be, condemned and hated by everybody because of this image I've created, this image of the mass murderer, this image of this dangerous incel. I'd rather be hated for that than for who I was. And that's how people are going to remember him, as the person who did all that stuff. But, you look in these reports, you see a very different story, don't you? I mean, for me personally, like all these social problems he had, the Tourette's and all that stuff, like, I mean, I wouldn't have bullied him for that stuff. Like, I don't hate him for that stuff. Again, if he hadn't killed all those people and done what he did, I would have felt sorry for him. But I don't think I'm the only one. He reported not wanting to go through that 2-week waiting period where my parents were extremely disappointed in me due to being fired again. More practically, he stated that the method of killing he had chosen required using a rental truck, and he was concerned that if he did not have a job, he would not be allowed to rent a truck, although he later realized this did not matter. So he's saying that, part of what drove him to do it was, I don't want my parents to be disappointed in me from being fired. But, it's okay if they're disappointed in me for, killing 11 people and ruining my whole life and, drawing them into all this negative media spotlight. Again, doesn't make sense, but also, again, that's something he can control. They can be disappointed in me for something that I've created, this facade, rather than who I really am. This thing about the rental truck is kind of weird. You have a lot of weird ideas about how that would work. I've kind of chalked it down to autism, but Mr. Minassian also stated he felt the need to do the mass killing as soon as possible because I was so scared of having an awkward encounter at work. So it's fear that's driving him, fear of more failure, fear of embarrassment. And that's part of what mass shooters do. They're weak, they're afraid, they're cowardly, and this is a way to create an image for themselves that's not that. Oh, I'm tough, I'm powerful, I'm scary. I killed all these people. Well, I mean, if you were so tough, you would have been able to handle the shit life was throwing at you and overcome it, Being a martyr is easy when you hate your life, right? Being a martyr is easy when you don't care about anybody else. When you think you're doomed to failure. But, I mean, this is a cliche, obviously, but continuing to live when you're struggling, when you're suffering, when you have all this horrible stuff ahead of you, that's the hard part. And that's what strength is. These attacks, they're expressions of weakness. I can't handle my life. I don't want to be alive anymore. I can't deal with this anymore. I'm going to kill people. I'm going to throw my life away. Regarding his loneliness, Mr. Minassian noted he wanted a girlfriend and felt sad he did not have one. He felt the mass killing was a way of getting back at society in general. If I'm going to lose anyway, not having a job, not having a girlfriend, having an extremely small social circle. Right. So, yeah, we've gotten to a point where he's openly saying, yeah, I did it to get back at society. I did it because I was mad at everybody, And there's a sense of resentment here, like society has deprived me of these things, Because otherwise, why would he want to get back at society, right? Why would he say that, why would he tie it to these things that he doesn't have, not having a job, not having a girlfriend, and so on. So, this is making him seem kind of more Elliot Rodgery and like he did blame other people for what happened to him. I can understand why he'd think that way. He has these things about himself that he can't control, the Tourette's, the autism, whatever. And, there are people who don't want to hire him. There are people who don't want to be his friend. And how much of that was actually his fault? Given that most of his experience was being rejected by other people, it's like, why would he like society if that's pretty much all he's known? But he did have friends, he did have people who supported him. He was going to have a $70K a year job right out of college. So it's not like you had nothing. It's not like you had no future, Managed to finish his degree. He got, support for his disability. He could take a reduced course load. He did have some help, for the Tourette's and other things. So it's not like he didn't get any help from anybody and was just, left to the wolves his whole life. He had something. And, again, you can get into that issue of, well, nobody owes you friendship. Nobody owes you anything. So it's not really fair to get mad at them. It's not fair to just take out your anger on random people because of things that other people have done to you. People who've never met you, people who've never done anything bad to you. That's not right. But so I guess what I'm trying to say is, yeah, what he did wasn't right. But spent his whole life being treated badly because of things about himself he can't control. Like, yeah, I can sympathize with him being upset about that and not having the most favorable view of other people and society. Like, doesn't justify what he did, but it makes sense. Mr. Minassian also noted he was aware that people who committed mass killings gain notoriety, that this person did this really big thing. Even if you die, your name is still remembered and circulates on the internet. If you were dead, you become martyrized, and it just adds to notoriety. Mr. Minassian indicated he intended to die as part of his van attack by forcing the police to kill him. He stated that his primary reason for intending to die was to avoid prison, but also because he was sad and lonely and just wanted to do this big act before he died. Okay, so he wanted to die anyway. Right. No surprises there, but this is the first time he's actually said that. Like, it's not just, oh, I don't want to go to jail. It's like, I wanted to die anyway. I didn't want to be alive anymore. So figured I might as well kill people in the process. So again, he's coming across as, more of a conventional mass shooter, somebody who wants to die anyway. And it's just like, well, I want to kill people beforehand, give all the assholes something they deserve. Yeah, so none of the doctors before were able to get any of the stuff out of him. But this guy was. So again, there's a value in having people who are going to be, more inclined towards a person's guilt or innocence. Mr. Minassian acknowledged also feeling a bit angry about not having a girlfriend, but stated he was primarily jaded. Like, you were bitter, you now see the negative, you were cynical, and don't see the good anymore. He stated he became jaded by the end of college. There was nothing new. People were talking to me less. I had no friends to talk to. Regarded being influenced by seeing mass shootings online, Mr. Minassian stated he knew most offenders were young, male, single, isolated, and he could identify with them. It's basically another high school student experiencing the same frustrations as me. In my head, I was kind of cheering them on, an underdog kind of thing, seeing the underdog that I am rooting for beating the much bigger opponent. Mr. Minassian stated it also helped to see how to do it, little things. For example, if I had a gun and was shooting up a school, don't get too close to people because someone could disarm you. He noted that he was reading about shootings both to learn about how to be effective, but also to enhance his fantasies about committing a mass shooting. Mr. Minassian once again stated, I could identify with them, and I liked what they're doing. So, and this is what they do now. They read the manifestos of other people who did the same thing, and they learn from it. They hear news reports of what they did, and they copy it. They're like, hey, this worked. I'm going to do that. And, I could identify with them and liked what they were doing. It's like, you have all these people who are killing other people for, often very different reasons. You've got, Brenton Tarrant who didn't like Muslims, Dylan Roof who didn't like black people, people who just kill random people with no identifiable reason at all, like Stephen Paddock. Like, why did he do what he did? We still don't really know that. But like, it kind of seems like, it's all the same to him, oh, they killed people, yeah, that's good. I like that. Yeah. They killed a bunch of people. I can identify with them. I like it. He just, again, it kind of goes to that idea of him just hating everybody. It doesn't matter what your cause is or why you're doing it or who you're targeting. Just you kill people. That's good. Good job. I like it. Yeah, that's fucked up. Mr. Minassian was aware that most people thought people who committed mass shootings were despicable, especially those who were closely affected. For example, family of the victims or close friends. Most people are going to think that mass shootings are totally senseless and no one is going to have any sympathy for the problems I have and those of the mass shooters. He believed at the time of his offenses that most people in the public would view both mass shootings and his own acts as morally wrong and unjustifiable. At the same time, Mr. Minassian noted there were fringe groups on the internet where people would be praising him and cheering them on, or maybe joke about it if they were immature teenagers. Okay, so that's quite a lot of insight into how other people are going to think. We're seeing a lot more here to suggest that, he understood how other people would think about this, and that it would be viewed as wrong, and he just didn't care, So, Mr. Minassian noted Elliot Rodger was the first mass killer who had a manifesto and fell into the same category as me, an isolated, lonely young male. He read the 100-plus page manifesto multiple times. He stood out so much more than all the other shooters in my mind, I just fixated on him more. I was awed by the fact that the entire world knew about him because of what he did. He wrote in his manifesto that he did not want to rot in obscurity. He noted that he shared that desire to avoid rotting in obscurity, being forgotten. Mr. Minassian acknowledged that the incel ideology did appeal to him. I was a bit jealous. I knew that attractive girls preferred guys who were bigger, physically attractive, and had a more aggressive personality than guys with a more passive personality. Mr. Minassian noted he did not experience the 24-hour rage that Rodger did, but it did influence me a little bit. He stated that he knew the incel ideology was not 100% accurate, but described it as true to a certain extent. Most girls do prefer guys who are nice, but who are confident as well. Okay, so yeah, In the first video I made about this, I was kind of going off his police interview and being like, he can't really, synthesize this stuff and just talk about how it's related to him. But, now that I'm reading this, it seems like he actually could do that up to a point. Like, he's noticing differences between Elliot Rodger and himself. The other reports were like, oh, he doesn't see a difference. But here he's like, well, I'm not as angry as him. And, some of these ideas aren't accurate. And, some of the people who support people like this are immature. And so, like, there's nuance here. Like, he's able to kind of compare and contrast Elliot Rodger with himself and, evaluate the incel ideology, whatever he's calling that. Whatever that means to him, and being like, well, yeah, these are parts that are accurate. These are parts that are not accurate. I think that girls do this stuff, but I also think that, some of the problem is me. Like, that's a lot more sophisticated than what we've kind of seen up to that point. And so, I kind of skimmed these reports beforehand. I didn't get into the Crown's reports until after I, had done that first one. But yeah, it's looking like I was kind of wrong about that. Like, he's more sophisticated than that. Like, the fact that when he was going in and trying to deceive the police in the way that he did, and he came up with what he came up with, kind of does suggest he has some issues with that, but like, not as much as they would suggest. Like, there's more nuance here. Mr. Minassian stated with the police he was thinking beforehand about how to prepare himself. He was thinking about the incel ideology as a way of forcing myself into the mindset so that I don't chicken out at the last minute. I was thinking negatively on purpose just to make myself do it, even though he knew it was not completely accurate. He agreed he was using the ideology to rev himself up. He stated, but I also wanted to want to do it. I was trying to push out all thoughts of trying to talk myself out of it. Mr. Minassian indicated the incel ideology provided the reason, and he wanted to post something on the internet. And so again, it's like, okay, he had doubts, and he's like deceiving himself into thinking that all this incel stuff is true because he knows that's going to make him do what he really wants to do, right? And so we got the Facebook post, something simple that was easy to say, a catchphrase. Bear in my mind I was expecting to die, and that the media would pick up on this. The most important words in that post were 4chan, incel, and Elliot Rodger, because 4chan gives you that identity, says I am with them. Incel because it indicates you are complaining about virginity, and Elliot Rodger, I am basically using his name to boost my name. It's kind of like working at a company and your boss is really famous. Some people might brag about working with him to boost their fame. So, yeah, this was a very calculated thing he did. He stuck all the right words in there that he knew would upset people. That was kind of my gut feeling when I saw it for the first time. Like, when I first, when the attack happened and I saw this post, it's like, okay, some guy on 4chan made that. Like, there's no way that's real, but it turned out it was. And it's like, well, okay, this was very obviously deliberately written to piss people off as much as possible. And now he's saying that, 4chan incel Elliot Rodger. Just say 4chan incel Elliot Rodger and everybody loses their shit. Mr. Minassian stated he decided on using a truck ultimately as a result of reading about similar attacks in Europe where people had used large trucks to kill a number of people in a short time. He believed this would be the most effective and most efficient manner apart from having a gun, which he rejected due to the reasons he noted earlier. Okay, more about the date. Yes, this section here shows that he was actually extremely calculated about what he did. Looked up the rental address and decided how he would get there, determined when he would have to wake up and how long it would take to get there. He was still doing his homework, but was spending most of his time thinking about where the major intersections were in Toronto with lots of pedestrians, using Google Street View to determine this. So he's looking at, Street View images being like, well, okay, are there going to be lots of people here? Okay, let's go to the next one. Are going to be lots of people here? Like it's very, very calculated. He was also trying to see if there were any obstructions. The sidewalk was too narrow to drive on, picked Yonge Street specifically, figured out how to get there, deciding what to post on Facebook and when to post it. He stated he first thought about whom to model himself after, including Elliot Rodger and the Columbine shooters, including using a phrase attributed to those shooters, all jocks stand up, we'll get the guys in the white caps. Mr. Minassian had read a lot about Columbine and Virginia Tech shootings. He stated he eventually decided on Elliot Rodger reference because he was more recent, had more media coverage, and a lot more notoriety than the guys who came after him. He stated he made this decision 2 to 3 days before he picked up the van. Mr. Minassian decided to post on Facebook through his mobile app, but stated he did so only after hitting victims. He wrote the post in the van, but noted he did not send it until he finished hitting people with the van. Yes, this is kind of fucked up. Like, he's doing his homework for college, and it's like, well, okay, homework. Okay, let's look up more about how to kill people. Okay, this is a good spot. Homework. Like, he really did not give a fuck. And, he really did not give a fuck. Like, 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 he really did not give a fuck then yeah, you didn't have to be Elliot Rodger either. He was thinking about Columbine. He could have done a Columbine post, but he was like, yeah, no, Elliot Rodger will get more in for me. I'll pick that. So like he didn't have his heart set on this for a long time. It was like, I want to do an attack. I want to piss people off. And, he didn't work out the finer details of all the incel stuff until like, a couple days later, if this is accurate. And again, yeah, very calculated, wrote the Facebook post in the van, posted it after hitting people. Mr. Minassian also said he was planning how to get the police to kill him and that this was very important. He thought about bringing a toy gun or a knife, but was worried about being security checked at the car rental agency. Mr. Minassian stated he remembered 2 weeks before the incident searching on the internet for cops shoot man wallet. He viewed a video from the United States showing a man accidentally shot by police for holding his wallet, which was mistaken for a weapon. He was particularly interested in trying to mimic the man's body movements, which led to police shooting him. He also thought about physically charging a police officer, but rejected this as too risky. What if he just beats me down instead? Okay, so like the wallet thing was stupid, but like he planned it. He watched a police shooting video where some guy did this and was like, okay, how can I do that same thing so they shoot me? I guess he wasn't savvy enough to realize, A, this was in the U.S. and B, that guy was probably black. If you're a white guy, it's harder to get that to happen, right? And that is one thing I heard people saying, like, yeah, if Alek Minassian was black and he did that, he would have just been shot immediately. And I mean, they're probably right about that, But yeah, charging a police officer would have probably made him more likely to shoot him, But, I might get beaten up, that's scary. I don't want to do that, Ran over 10 people, but, hey, might get beaten up. I don't want to get beaten up. I'll just do this wallet thing. Lied to his parents about meeting a friend, and he came up with the lie like a week beforehand. Mr. Minassian noted he made no plans to communicate his intentions to his parents, a note, etc., because I knew they would see it on the news. He stated it never crossed my mind to leave a note for his parents. Maybe because it wasn't an actual suicide. It was like killing people. Mr. Minassian knew his parents would be very disappointed, but I wanted to do it so badly anyways. I had already made up my mind to do it, and I had nothing if I didn't do it. He described this as a sense of failure, like I can't advance in life. I was worried I wouldn't get anywhere. So again, reiterating, like, yeah, I know my parents would be disappointed, but, I just wanted to do it, man. Regarding whether he ever considered hiring a sex worker as a sexual outlet, Mr. Minassian stated, I was never that upset, that desperate to do that. He also stated he was worried that he might be arrested if he sided with a prostitute. Okay, so that was how he thought about it. It's like, I might go to jail. I don't want to go to jail, man. Yeah, someone who was a little less inhibited might have just been like, screw jail. I'm getting all the prostitutes. I'll be the star of my own pee-porn show. Yeah, not so much for him, I guess. When asked about what he thought should happen to him, Mr. Minassian indicated his awareness of the consequences of being convicted of murder and that he could die in prison due to potentially receiving a long sentence. Mr. Minassian stated, most people would say that the correct thing would be to put me in prison. He noted, I don't think I was mentally ill at the time, to be honest, but also indicated that if he had been mentally ill, he might not have noticed it. Okay. Yeah, maybe not the smartest thing to say if you're doing an NCR defense, but at least he was honest, I guess. Mr. Minassian described his mood as fairly normal and stable in the week before the incident, although he was getting himself in a frame of mind to commit the acts. He struggled to articulate his mood in the month beforehand, but did describe feeling high energy at the point he decided to do it, end of March. He denied any change in his sleep. It was okay, including the night before the incident. He reported normal appetite, energy, and concentration. And he looked at pee porn. I don't know why they would just randomly redact this. Probably something about his sexual functioning. Like, yeah, I was still able to look at pee porn. My pee porn watching habits didn't change. I don't know why they redacted all that stuff, to be honest. Like, he noted the primary purpose of dying was to avoid prison rather than being part of suicidal thoughts. Mr. Minassian denied having any specific targets. I knew it would be random. I did want it to be the couple crowd, like people holding hands. He stated that if possible, he would have targeted females over males, but did not identify any other preference for his victims. Yeah, so still changing his story here. First he was like, yeah, I wanted to target females. I was hoping for more females as I was running them over. But here he's like, well, I would have targeted females, just, hypothetically speaking, would have targeted females. Didn't have any specific targets. I would have done it, though. I wasn't trying to do it, no. But he wanted to run over couples now, so people holding hands. Oh, relationships, kill them all. He was never hospitalized for a psychiatric reason prior to his arrest. He never attempted suicide prior to his arrest. He did make a suicide attempt in 2 weeks before his transfer to Hamilton, June or July 2018. He reported attempting to drink bottles of liquid soap. It just resulted in his vomiting. He wanted to die and stated he had been thinking about this for a week. He stated he was completely alone and felt this would continue for the next 60 years until age 85. During our second interview, Mr. Minassian reported having posted only on Facebook prior to the offenses. He noted his Facebook setting was open and he believed the media would immediately check his account after the attack. He noted that he intended for the general public via the media to see his post. He noted he actually rarely posted on 4chan, Reddit, and Encyclopedia Dramatica. He stated that posts on those sites do not require the use of a real name. He felt people might not see his post for years at all, if he posted there. Mr. Minassian noted his Facebook post was a message to primarily the fringe groups. He thought there was a possibility that someone might be inspired to copycat him at some point in the future. When asked, he eventually offered that he thought the incel ideology accounted for perhaps 50% of the reason/motivation for conducting his attack. This was in contrast to his earlier estimations as noted above. So that was actually a pretty smart thing to think, because I think it was like Brenton Tarrant posted on 8chan that he was going to do his attack. There was I think there was like a couple other school shooters or mass shooters, I should say, that posted on 4chan. And, most people don't see them, the media will touch upon it a little bit. Like, oh yeah, there was this post there, but they don't really mention it that much. Yeah, if you ever see that Brenton Tarrant 8chan thread, it's super fucked up. He's like, okay, guys, I'm going to do a shit post in real life. And they're all like, yeah. And there are people in there like literally watching the live stream being like, oh, yeah, this is great. You kill all those people. This is awesome. And if you're someone who hasn't seen stuff like that before, it's like opening the gate to hell and being like, whoa, this is fucked, man. What is going on in there? But yeah, most people aren't going to see that stuff. Most people aren't even going to know what happened. But, you post on a mainstream platform, people will see it. One thing that's happened more recently is that social media platforms are getting much quicker about deactivating the accounts of these people so other people don't see it. And, usually there's going to be a couple people who, save it. Like they're still not that quick about it. The internet's often faster, but sometimes it's not. And sometimes a lot of things are just, lost and nobody saves them. There's that old stereotype that you can't delete anything on the internet, but you can. There has to be someone or something that saves stuff, and that doesn't always happen. So yeah, this was a clever decision. Oh yeah, people won't see it if I post it on 4chan, because he knows of other examples where that's happened. So it's like, I'll put it on Facebook where people are going to see it, where it's obviously me, right? Because that's another thing that happens too. It's like there's this post on 4chan where it's like, okay, guys, I'm going to do an attack today. Like, how do you know it's the same person? Again, here he's like changing his story about why he did it. Oh yeah, incel is 50% of it, and it's I don't know. Maybe he himself doesn't even know, or maybe he's just throwing shit out there. I don't know. On the day of the attack, Mr. Minassian got up around 8 a.m. and had breakfast, possibly with his mother. He stated thinking, this is the last day, I have to do this. He was also nervous there might be some snag that would interfere with his committing the act. He stated he was both excited and nervous. So before it was like, I don't feel anything. And now it's like, I'm nervous and excited, I'm going to do something really cool, but it also might not work out, and it's like, how fucked up is that? Like he has breakfast with his mom beforehand. Like, just, sitting there with your mom having toast, it's normal conversation, but, thinking in your head, oh yeah, I'm going to run people over today, Hey, pass the jam, Mom. Yeah. Yeah. How's your morning going, Mom? You going to do anything cool after work today? Yeah, okay, let's see, how am I going to get the police to kill me? It's just like, it's so fucked up, that you can just do normal shit like that all the while thinking, yeah, this is what I'm going to do. But that's how it works. That's, yeah, poor mom. Okay, this is interesting. So his father drops him off at the Starbucks and then waits in the parking lot to see if he meets his friend, which is, I guess is something that, a concerned parent who, is still worried about their kid might do. You got to make sure he meets the person. And it's like, oh shit, the friend isn't there. What am I going to do? Oh yeah, you don't have to watch me. He's going to be here soon. When asked about what would have happened if he could not proceed that day for any reason, Mr. Minassian stated he would have walked back to the Starbucks and then lied to his parents about the meeting. Stated if he was delayed a day, he still would have committed the attack. Would have fixed a flat tire. Was going to send the post right before he started the attack. Originally planned to start his attack around redacted because of the number of people he anticipated would be there. He noted he wanted the route to be as easy as possible from where he got off the highway, straight down Yonge Street. After he got onto Yonge Street, Mr. Minassian noted he was very nervous and was wondering if he would really be able to do it once he got there or would chicken out and just keep driving down the road. However, he stated that when he got to Yonge and Finch, he began to think, I am doing it now. He stated he thought, I am going to do it, I might as well. He remembered thinking there were enough people after he saw 5 people waiting at the light. So he's calculating, like, is this going to be a good attack? Are there enough people? Yep, okay, off I go. And he's nervous too. So it's like, it's not like he was just totally flat and it was the same as, having breakfast that day. It's like he was nervous. He knew the enormity of what he was going to do. I was in the second lane to the right. As soon as the light turned green, I floored it and cut in front of the guy on my right. I remember I initially got on the sidewalk and I hear a thud. When I hit the initial batch of people, 5 or so, there was one young man and one young woman in their early 20s. Well, mine was blank. I couldn't see anything, but then I could see the road. Then I hit the next group within 5 to 10 seconds on the sidewalk. I may have hit 70 to 80% of them. After this, I was thinking, did I really do that? Everything has really changed. Now the police are going to come after me. I knew they would come to arrest me because I have just hit a group of people, and that is against the law. He clarified that he had always known that his intended actions were against the law. He stated that it took about 2 minutes of driving before he hit any more people. I wasn't thinking much. My heart was beating fast. I wanted more victims. I was going to continue until I was stopped. Then on the next block, I see more people. I was able to hit most, if not all of them, in a straight line with a slight curve, about 5 to 10 people. Then there was another period of calm where there was no one on the sidewalk, about 1 minute. I could hear the police sirens in the distance. My mind is focused on the situation at hand. Continue driving in a straight line and continue hitting anyone I see. I remember then I see an old woman pushing a walker. I ran over her as well. She was the only one I saw for that huge stretch of the sidewalk. Then I continued to drive for a little bit, another 20 to 30 seconds, and remember I see a middle-aged couple about to cross the street. They may or may not have been holding hands. Nevertheless, I hit them. One of them must have had a drink in their hand because a drink splashed on my windshield and I couldn't see anything. At that point, I was panicking. Why can't I see? Everything is screwed up. That he would not be able to continue the attack. I remember at that point I was worried I would hit a pole, so I turned left on the road and started driving south on the northbound lanes. There weren't any cars there. Then there was an old man who was jaywalking at that time. I hit him as well. Yeah, he really didn't give a fuck, did he, Yeah, like if you're a normal person, you hit one person by accident, like it'll be horrible. Like you probably never forgive yourself. He's just like, yep, this is what I did. Ran over the old lady with the walker, ran over all these groups of people. Oh, middle-aged couple, run them over too. Old man jaywalking, get him too. Like he really didn't care. And I didn't like the fact that people tried to say this was an autism thing. Like, I remember being like fucking, 5 years old. And, if I hurt another kid, there was this instinctive feeling of like, that didn't feel good, and I was pretty fucked up at 5, a lot of issues, but all right, well, okay, this is him settling the car down. A few seconds after I slowed down, I remembered to post that message on Facebook. The car was rolling forward at slow speed. I unlocked my phone and pressed send. Then I locked my phone and put it back in the cup holder, and I have that feeling of satisfaction that I have just completed that task, posting the message on Facebook. At that point, I felt much more satisfied and happier, and I continued driving forward. Okay, so, he's happy. He accomplished something, Ran over all the people, posted his scary message on Facebook, and he's happy and satisfied. He liked what he did. There's the cop thing with the wallet. I didn't think this part was particularly interesting. Just going to go over it again. Oh yeah, the murdering piece of shit. It was just something I wanted to say for dramatic effect. He was in a cell for several hours before being interviewed by police and giving his statement. So yeah, I said before, he was just, preparing what he did beforehand. So, he had a lot of time in his cell to think of, okay, what are all the scary things I'm going to tell the police? Okay, so he sees the interrogation being shown on TV, and he's like, to be honest, I was a little bit happy about the attention. That's why I did that, specifically for the notoriety. That someone is going to make a big deal about this, just like they did for Elliot Rodger. When asked about a hypothetical involving a scenario where his name was never released to the public after the attack and how he would feel, Mr. Minassian stated, I would feel very disappointed because I would not get the credit for this. No one would know I had done it. When asked about his feelings both now and at the time of the attack, Mr. Minassian stated, I do feel satisfied. The fact that I had achieved 10 kills, that I had actually managed to do it, and that I hadn't chickened out on it. When asked about the impact on others, Mr. Minassian stated he knew that the families of the victims and the surviving victims were very upset about this. When asked what he would say to them, he stated, "To be honest, I don't know what I would say to them. If I was in a courtroom, I might apologize." When asked if he actually felt sorry for what he did, he stated, "I don't know, it's kind of hard to answer that question." When asked if he had any regrets about what he did, Mr. Minassian stated, "I would be lying if I said I did." So he wasn't sorry, obviously. When asked if he could do it over, was there anything he would change, he noted, "I would probably think about ways to get a higher kill count." When asked about the impact of his actions on anyone else, Mr. Minassian reported feeling guilty after hearing his father say on TV that he was upset and did not imagine his son could do anything like this. At the same time, he had anticipated that someone close to him would likely make comments to the police and that his parents would be sad and disappointed by his actions. Okay, so he didn't care, right? It was all about him, what he wanted, you know? Okay, so he's saying no one encouraged him to commit the attack. When asked about how he felt about having killed more people than Elliot Rodger, who killed 6, Mr. Minassian remembered being happy when he learned he had killed 10 and saw this as his carrying the torch for Elliot Rodger, but now it is burning even brighter. At the same time, Mr. Minassian acknowledged that nothing was likely to change based on his attack, i.e., women would not be any more likely to date men like him, and stated his attack was more about getting back at people in general and gaining notoriety, becoming famous for committing these acts. "If I am going to fail anyways, I might as well do this anyway." When asked if there was any sexual component to the attacks, whether he was sexually aroused by the idea of the attack or had ever masturbated to thoughts of committing a mass murder, Mr. Minassian denied this. Yeah, so obviously, I mean, you can look at attacks like this and say, well, hey, you know, if you guys think this is somehow going to make things better for people like you, like, it's really not, you know. Because what's the end result of what Minassian did, you know? Oh, maybe autism makes you want to kill people, you know? Incels all want to kill people. Let's not help them. Let's just ostracize them, you know? But, and he's saying here that, like, he didn't care about that. He didn't care about making anything better for anybody. It was just, I just want revenge on society. I want to be famous. That's it, you know? Yeah, and this part here is weird, but, you know, they have to ask that because this is a thing that happens. Mr. Minassian noted when he saw news about him in the media, he stated, "I would be lying if I didn't feel a little proud when I see that." He noted that jail was restrictive, but fairly clean, and he had certain privileges, including access to a TV. He has never been exposed to any physical violence. When comparing it to his previous life, he again noted it was more restrictive in jail because I have been used to it for a year and a half. There are good days and bad days. Mr. Minassian noted he had been treated well. Oh, well, that's good, you know. Mr. Minassian has been the subject of reports to date authored by Dr. Mamek, Dr. Chan, and Dr. Bradford. I also had an opportunity to review their interview notes in addition to the reports, although that information was in keeping with the content of the reports. Okay, so he had literally everything. Dr. Wright has already commented extensively on the report of Dr. Mamek, and I will not further review it below, but rather refer the reader to Dr. Wright's report in that regard. Yeah, okay, so we're going to jump to Dr. Wright now and then go to Angeli Boudreau, and then we're going to go over like his, you know, thoughts about all the reports to date because he'll have seen all of them. So okay, first up is Wright's report. Okay, so we moved on to Wright's report. Wright is a forensic psychologist that Woodside contacted to help him with his report. Okay, so this is all the stuff he has. We'll go over some of these tests later. You can see he repeated the personality assessment inventory. MMPI, it's another personality test. Another malingering test. Yeah, so the Crown is basically doing their own assessment of Minassian, repeating a lot of the stuff that Westphal and his buddies did, just to make sure. Yeah, we can see he also read Elliot Rodger's manifesto here. Yeah, so as with the other interviews, they're commenting on his lack of emotional reactions to the victims. He thinks it's an autism thing. More background. There's a few more interesting things about his school experience here. He stated he was in a constant state of fear, but also stated that he had mixed feelings about the teasing, stating that he disliked the teasing, feared the people and rejection, but liked the attention that came with the teasing. He estimated that he was teased roughly weekly. Despite the situation, he stated that he had 3 close friends who remained his friends throughout grade and high school. So yeah, constant state of fear is kind of suggesting that this had something to do with learned helplessness. Like, you know, I'm going to be teased no matter what I do. Nothing I can do can stop it. And so this, the silly voice and, you know, the deflecting it and getting them to make fun of this image is a coping mechanism for that, it seems. So yeah, so that was kind of my theory before. This is making it seem more and more like that's the case. So just the girl he was attracted to in high school. And he looked at pee porn. Mr. Minassian asserted that he pretended to be afraid of girls and would fake teeth chattering or mimic a crying sound. He stated that he did this because he was too shy and knew he would mess it up if he actually spoke to girls. He stated that once in high school, a girl said hi to him in the hall, and he simply responded with an exaggerated crying sound. So that's kind of weird, and, you know, like, if this is how you react, it's kind of a vicious cycle. You know, oh, girls are going to reject me, so I'm not going to talk to them. So you don't develop the social skills you need, so they keep rejecting you, and then, you know, so, like, if you start with this assumption of, you know, I'm always going to be rejected, so I'm just going to, you know, get rid of them somehow, or, you know, not try and have these experiences, like, you're never going to get better. And indeed he didn't. But yeah, this stuff is actually quite weird here. Okay, so here we can see he's gone back to the original story that he told Westfall. He stated that he did ask one woman out in the library, but later realized she was not interested. He stated that he thought about his rejection for a few weeks, but got over it and didn't view this as a major event in his history. Later realized she wasn't interested. So, like, they have a conversation, and then he didn't realize that till later. So maybe he's changed the story again. It's a different one. Interesting. Okay, so this is more about him playing video games at work. He said he was addicted to video games and that distorted his thinking, and that his distortion led him to continue playing video games at work despite 5 warnings, leading to his being fired in October 2016. He stated at the time he was playing RuneScape, a medieval fantasy multiplayer battle game. Yeah, 5 warnings. Yeah, I mean, that's sounds like an addiction to me, certainly. I'm lying to his parents about it. Lying to his parents about the army. He stated that he had been regularly visiting an incel website from early 2016 and had heard about Roger and his manifesto, and also claimed he was not overly familiar with incel beliefs, the red, blue, and black pill. Yeah, I wonder which incel website that was. I mean, he's probably not naming it because he doesn't want to give them publicity, right? So, yeah, that's the interesting thing. You know, if you look at mass killers, they often don't have much of a digital footprint. Like, it's rare you'll see somebody who was, you know, an active member of, you know, a forum, particularly one related to the whatever their ideology was, if they have one. Like, you know, presumably Elliot Rodger and Alek Minassian visited incel forums at some point, but, you know, we don't know who they were. There's no accounts that can be linked to them, and what's often the case is that these people are just lurkers. They're kind of on the periphery, which again makes it harder to predict who the threat's going to be. It's a good chance it'll be somebody that, again, isn't on anyone's radar. Some more about his mass shooting fantasies. He stated that these fantasies were frequent and that he enjoyed these fantasies and believed he would enjoy engaging in the actual act. He stated that he had always fantasized about using a handgun in these scenarios and would be targeting students he disliked and random people, attempting to avoid killing people that he liked. So again, it's, you know, if this can be believed, this is more in the territory of a conventional mass shooter. I want to kill people I don't like. You know, I generally hate people, but, you know, I like some people, so maybe I won't kill them. And yeah, it'd be really fun to kill people, you know. He stated he knew that people would be upset that their loved ones would have been killed, but he stated that he would get a high score in terms of the number of people killed in such an act. Oh, so he was thinking about the high score thing before. Like, yeah, I can get a high score on Encyclopedia Dramatica or whatever. Yeah, I don't really understand the psychology of that well, but I guess, you know, if your goal is to be famous, you want to be more famous than all the other people who did the same thing. You know, it's like, it's kind of like wanting to beat the Guinness World Record for something. You know, some guy eats 50 eggs and you want to eat 51 eggs. You know, like, it's stupid, but, you know, people get hung up on these things. So yeah, if this is what you value, if this is what you want to do, then it makes sense. You know, of course you want to be better than all the other people who did the same thing, or maybe you want to be distinctive. Maybe you want to do something that no one else has done before. Like, if you think about, like, any other domain of human accomplishment, you know, art or music or, you know, starting a business, like, it's exactly the same thing. You want to be better than your competitors. You want to do something cool that no one else did, and you want to get renowned for it. And so it's that exact same mentality, just applied to something that's really messed up. Okay, so he stated that he felt lonely and teased and experienced numerous failures because of his shyness and not studying, and if he had engaged in a school shooting then committed suicide, he would be free of all of these negative thoughts. So the pain will stop if I die. That makes sense. I asked him what he might want on his tombstone if he had actually done this, and he stated he didn't really think about this, but thought more about the news story and how much press he would receive. That's an interesting question. So college gave him a bit more of a purpose. It's like, yeah, you know, going to college, turning over a new leaf. And yeah, I've heard incels talk about this. It's like, oh, my parents said things would always change, and I went to college, it's not going to be like high school. And, then it didn't, right? People said things would change when I went out into the real world after college, and then it didn't, yeah, so I've heard that. I mean, you look at like the age range of people on incel forums. Yeah, it's mostly people under the age of 25. And I mean, I figure the reason for that is that, most of them eventually grow out of it. They kind of leave behind this very juvenile environment full of people talking about Chads and Stacys and trying to be as offensive as possible. If you're an adult, that's going to be less likely to be appealing to you. But some of them don't leave. There are people on incel forums who are 30, 40, 50. They're not common, but they exist. And that's kind of what they say. It's like at each new kind of transition in their life, going to a new school or, graduating school or whatever, they get told, oh yeah, this is totally going to be different than what you had before. And then it's just not. So I don't know if he got told this, but yeah, that would certainly make sense. Got some stuff about his priorities here. He was rather inconsistent as to how important killing women was relative to a desire to simply kill people. At this point in his interview, he stated he wanted to kill women preferably, but obtaining the highest number of kills was his overarching goal, ideally 100 people. He stated that if he accomplished this, the media would talk about him and his level of success a great deal. He stated that he would obtain a high score on the Encyclopedia Dramatica scoreboard and a great deal of recognition on the Reddit incel page. Yeah, there's an interesting conversation to be had about how the internet and video games have kind of hijacked the human brain's reward system and desire for innovation, because because the kind of satisfaction you'd get from starting a business and making a lot of money and coming up with an innovative product. It's you can get a similar kind of satisfaction from getting a really high score in a video game, from being successful in a video game, from getting a lot of likes and Reddit karma and stuff like that. So it makes you feel like you're accomplishing something, but you're kind of not. And as someone on YouTube, it's kind of relatable. Like, yeah, I like it when my like counters go up and when my view counts go up and, I get a lot of likes and views. But like, what does that actually mean? Like, what have I actually accomplished, right? I don't know. Yeah, so like I've kind of gone off the rails a bit, but the reason I bring this up is because, as I was saying before, like it is actually kind of an understandable way of thinking and motivating yourself. It's just being applied to something that's really messed up that most people wouldn't want to do. Like, oh yeah, I'd like to kill 100 people and be the leader on the scoreboard of this random website. Like that's messed up, but some people are like, hey, I want to get the high score in this indie game and have the world record for it, and they spend hours and hours and hours of their free time doing it. Like, normal people do normal versions of the same thing. He stated if his kill count was high, he would not be viewed as a failure or screw up that never got promoted and was thought of as weird. So that's not logical. Like, if you're a normal person looking at him and what he did, like, yeah, he's weird. Yeah, he never got promoted, and he's always going to be weird, and he'll always never get promoted because he's going to be in jail for the rest of his life. So, like, you've cemented your reputation in the world as that. Yeah, you killed people, but like you didn't make this stuff go away. So it's kind of weird to me how he thought that would happen. I guess maybe he wanted to be something other than that, and his idea was, well, if I continue as I'm going, I'll just never be more than that. So, yeah, he's speaking in absolutes, like I won't be viewed that way, but maybe that was kind of closer to what he thought. Like, I want something more than this. Okay. So this is kind of revealing about his state of mind when he was renting the van. He described worrying about whether he would be able to speak in a neutral enough tone to get away with the rental, whether he would be able to act natural enough to be allowed to rent the vehicle. He had rehearsed some lies in case he was asked such questions, planning to say he needed to help a friend move, and using the voice of a younger person as he thought this would make his prepared story more believable. Yeah, so I talked about this in my last video about the trial. So like one of the beliefs that Westphal and other people have was that he didn't have enough theory of mind to really understand what he was doing. And one of the ways that you know if someone has theory of mind is if they can successfully deceive people and come up with plausible lies to tell them, because you have to know what another person's state of mind is and know enough about how they think in order to be able to tell lies that they're going to find believable. So, speaking in a neutral enough tone, yeah, if you sound scared, they're going to be like, well, what's going on with this guy? So that makes sense. rehearsed some lies that, helping a friend move, that's a normal thing to do. Using a voice of a younger person. I'm not sure what he thought that was, but I mean, yeah, if you try to make yourself seem younger, they might be like, oh, he's just some young guy. He's kind of awkward, doesn't know what he's doing. Like, it'll make it more believable. So this stuff all makes sense, and it shows that, we can do that up to a point. There's an interesting part here too. Now he's telling Wright that he wanted to send a message to the Stacys and Chads for dating abusive and aggressive men, i.e. for the folly of Stacys dating such men, implying a more incel-based motivation for the offenses. So again, he's changing his story. He's like, first he was like, oh yeah, I just made it up to the police and just wanted to be infamous. Changed his motivations there a few times with Woodside. Now it's like, oh yeah, I actually did want to get the Chads and the Stacys. The Stacys are wrong for dating abusive and aggressive men, so I'm just gonna murder them all. Yeah, that'll show them. They should have dated someone like me who definitely isn't abusive and aggressive. Like, ugh. Kind of makes me question why I'm even looking at all this stuff. Like, this guy just lied his ass off all the time. I mean, who knows what the hell was true? But I mean, I guess the hope was that, if we see enough consistency and enough revealing things that, a person would have no reason to make up, then, we might be able to come up with some things that are probably true. But this does make it difficult. Like, okay, so he stated that before starting to hit people, he had hoped to hit more women, but once he got started, he was just hoping to kill people of any gender. So I'm starting to wonder if that had more to do with him being afraid of failure. Like, oh, it's might be too hard just to get women, like, I have to pick him out, and if I see a man, I have to ignore him, and maybe I won't have time to get enough of them, so I'll just get everybody, maybe. But he wanted his high score, so this would make sense. Okay, here we go. I asked him what he might have wanted on his tombstone if his suicide by cop plan had worked. He stated that he would want something dramatic for media effect, such as maybe, Stacys denied him love, so he denied them life. Because that's real fucking original. Yeah, it's another Elliot Rodger line. Yeah, I'm still not sure where the whole Chad and Stacey thing comes from. It's kind of a weird anachronism. Like, who names their kids Chad and Stacey these days? Like, how many Chads and Staceys are you going to meet if you're in high school? Probably not that many. Yeah, I've heard conflicting stories about where they came up with those things. Some of them are pretty weird, but yeah, I'm not sure what the origin of that is. Okay, so yeah, he did the anger disorder scale with him again. Indicated that he generally does not express or show his anger, but prefers to let his anger dissipate while he is alone on his own, but added that thinking about the perceived insult can prolong his experience of anger. Noted that he is not prone to confront a person who has angered him directly. He endorsed resenting that his life has treated him badly and explained that he has not gone as far as people he knows in terms of careers, and he sees that others have cool jobs while he is only stuck in a rut or hole, noting that the job he had was not pleasant, that he had not finished his degree, and if it was not for his parents, he would be homeless. He stated that his depression, loneliness, and sense of failure fueled his anger. He stated that he often fantasized about changing his irreversible past decisions, going back in time and somehow becoming more popular, with the end result that he would have had more friends as an adult. He noted that his anger and resentment were also fueled by seeing people on Facebook who seemed to be doing better than him and seemed happier. Yeah. Yeah, so again, more Elliot Rodgery. We're getting to a more human motivation here instead of all the weird incel stuff. And yeah, Facebook, like, yeah, that's one of the most destructive impacts of social media, I think, is that everybody puts their best foot forward and creates this idealized version of themselves where it seems like they're always having fun and always doing cool stuff, and they're really pretty and have nice clothes, and it's all fake, man. But yeah, that kind of envy has been a driving force of capitalism for a long time. My neighbor has a nicer car than me. I'd like to have a better car than him. So your sense of how well off you are is kind of fueled by those in your immediate social circle. But now we have the internet, so you're competing with literally everybody everywhere. And it's easier to put up a false front. You got all these tools to make your picture look prettier than it is, and all these tricks and angles. And so, you can create this image of yourself that is in no way what you're actually like in real life. But, just some random dude looking at your profile, they're not going to know that. Yeah, so I really don't think it's a positive thing. And here we got a mass murderer saying, well, I saw happier people on Facebook. And I mean, who knows how much of a role that played in what he did. But like, Yeah, I think that messes up a lot of people for sure. So this is interesting to me. One of the things he said in his personality test was most people have good intentions, which is kind of a weird thing for someone like that to say. Like, if you think most people are good, then why would you want to kill random people? And which he points out, that would kind of suggest that he's more of a sociopath, like he doesn't care whether people are good or bad or what their intentions are. He just wants to kill people and get his high score. So other people think is irrelevant. Like a psychopath doesn't really care if most people are good or not. And in fact, they'll exploit that. They'll exploit people being good to get what they want. Whereas if you have someone who's, not a sociopath or a psychopath, but, is driven by resentment and, anger at how awful society is, then you wouldn't expect to see something like this. Okay, so he endorsed being troubled by memories of past experiences. So, he's ruminating on bad stuff that happened to him and, social mistakes in high school and university. He endorsed having nightmares about his past, but those involved memories of having been tongue-tied and failing socially. He endorsed that he had thought of what he might say in a suicide note. He stated he would state in such a note that he had failed at a range of things and he simply did not want to be on the planet anymore. He added that some of his most anxiety-invoking failures involved exams rather than social situations. Here's a guy who has, just massive amounts of social anxiety, and all these incidents in which he's failed have been traumatizing to him to the point where he's, reliving them, however many years later. He's having nightmares about them. It's the fact that he failed socially was just so devastating to him. He couldn't let it go. Which perhaps explains why he snapped when he thought about failing socially at work. Like, he's still reliving all these past failures, constantly. He hasn't gotten over it. Okay, so this is more over the records we've already seen. So when he was 5, he's described as he could construct stories and use symbolic play that was highly imaginative. This would be somewhat unusual for an individual who is suffering from severely concrete thinking. Yeah, so the previous reports were trying to say that he wasn't good at that sort of thing, and here's something saying, well, even when he was 5, he was quite imaginative, and, if he was this kind of autistic person, maybe he wouldn't have done that. Okay. So they went over the stuff on his computer. They found the glass phones video. They didn't really find much else. I forget what the story was with that. From what I remember, he was clever enough to hide his tracks there, so they didn't get much out of him. Okay, so this goes over the stories that he wrote. We're going to see what that was about in more detail. One from when he was 15, where he talks about how stealing is wrong and you shouldn't keep it a secret. He also indicates that if a person is poor, this might be looked on differently, implying some degree of empathy, at least in a formulaic sense. Okay, that's fair. But yeah, I mean, maybe we can't read too much into that, right? Because if you're doing a school assignment and you steal stuff every day and you think stealing is great, like, are you going to say that? Oh yeah, I think stealing is wonderful. I stole from my parents yesterday. If you're writing something that's going to be seen by people in positions of authority, like, are you going to say that? Of course not. You're going to say the right answer. Stealing is wrong. Following the law is good, whether you believe it or not. He seems like someone who would have been smart enough to do that. He also wrote an essay on values indicating, I would not budge from my commitment. I would not budge from these values. In another essay, he argues that spanking of children is okay if the children are not hurt and the punishment is not for no reason. In 2008, he wrote an essay, Murder is Wrong, whereby he writes about how Hitler wronged the Jewish people and Canada contributed to the war effort. They also weren't keen on letting Jewish refugees into the country, but yeah. In another assignment, he notes that affirmative action is good, and in yet another notes that Native Canadians were not treated well and had a lot taken away. In 2010, he writes about cheaters on an exam and clearly acknowledges it is wrong, but does not seem to apply a more collectivist rationale for this. An updated justice document is also contained in which he attempts to explain the utility of incarceration in terms of teaching a lesson, protection of the public, and forcing offenders to apologize. He also discusses issues of accused rights. So obviously these are all the right answers that you should say for everything. All the answers that people are going to want. If he had written something like, I think affirmative action is a horrible idea because, it devalues the accomplishments of minorities or, something like that, people opposed to it say, that I would have been more inclined to take that seriously because it would have been something that, the school didn't want to hear. And so if he said it, then it would have obviously been a sincerely held conviction and not just something he's saying because it's the right answer, right? So if he'd gone against the grain, then, I would have been more inclined to to believe these were his real thoughts. But here he's writing all this stuff like, again, there's that question, does he actually believe it? Or is it just, oh, this is what I'm supposed to say? Murder is wrong. Hitler's bad, and of course, if you're writing an assignment for school about cheating, then of course cheating is wrong and you would never do it, ever. Yeah, this last part's kind of funny, though. He's like, oh, yeah, you should incarcerate people to teach them a lesson and protect the public. It's like, oh, okay, well, that's what we're going to do to you. So obviously you don't have any problems with that, Accused writes, Theroux's thought of how men are expected to behave in order to be viewed as manly, of importance diagnostically as he discusses two metaphors, one of carrying knives and the other in terms of an ill-fitting coat in non-concrete terms, particularly the latter metaphor. I don't know what that means. Like, is it manly to have a knife or an ill-fitting coat? I'm going to look that up, actually. Okay, so it turns out this was an essay from the New York Times like 40 years ago. Fetishists are nearly always men, and their commonest fetish is a woman's shoe. I cannot read that sentence without thinking it is just one more awful thing about being a man, and perhaps it is the most important thing to know about us. I have always disliked being a man. The whole idea of manhood in America is pitiful, a little like having to wear an ill-fitting coat for one's entire life. Wow, this is exactly something I would expect a writer from the New York Times to write. Even the expression, be a man, strikes me as insulting and abusive. It means be stupid, be unfeeling, obedient and soldierly, and stop thinking. It is a hideous and crippling lie. It not only insists on difference and connives at superiority, it is also by its very nature destructive, emotionally damaging, and socially harmful. Okay, maybe this tells us a bit about the kind of school he went to. That he just got inundated with crap like this. All this shit from feminists about how to be a man. You try to tell them how to be a woman. Oh, you're a bad person. Toxic masculinity. No toxic femininity. Yeah. Funny how that goes, isn't it? Okay, where's the knife part? Okay, here we go. A man proves his manhood in America in old-fashioned ways. He kills lions like Hemingway, or he hunts ducks like Nathaniel West, or he makes pronouncements like a man should carry enough knife to defend himself with, as James Jones once said to a Life magazine interviewer. Okay, I think I've lost enough brain cells for one day. That's enough of that. Okay, so we still don't know what he said about that stuff. Obviously, it wasn't something that concerned Wright because he doesn't comment on it further. Yeah, honestly, my gut reaction to that was, holy shit, man, no wonder he fucking killed people. Anyway, all right, purpose of sentencing assignment seems to be aware of the concept of deterrence, although it is unclear whether this is general or specific. So general deterrence being you want to deter the general public from doing bad stuff, and specific being you want to deter the actual criminal himself from doing bad stuff. So there's a distinction there, and you have to kind of balance those. Okay, so we have got a movie about a vigilante guy. Mr. Minassian does indicate that he understands that mistreatment, past and present, must be taken into account, but argues that the male perpetrator had mens rea because he had rage but no noted other disturbance. Again, when he was 17, an assignment about automatism, which is where you do stuff without knowing you're doing it. There were a few sexual assault cases where that happened. It's like, oh, I don't remember that I did that to her, Your Honor. And, well, I mean, of course you didn't, sir. Of course you didn't. I mean, yeah, I don't know much about it, so I can't speak to whether it's a real thing. It does seem convenient. So this is a guy who stabbed his wife soon after feeling insulted, and Mr. Minassian argues that mere words would not evoke an automatism reaction. Oh, so it can be evoked. Yeah, I have no idea. In 2009, he completed an assignment, it seems, that involved the bucket list concept. So bucket lists are supposed to be like, good stuff. Like, I'd like to go on a vacation to this cool place, or do this cool thing, or, eat a meal at this expensive restaurant or something. But here, his bucket list is he would never compliment himself, never insult David, or burn one Ava Crescent. It is not clear what this means, but this appears to be a residential address. He also lists 5 names of individuals he labels as glorious. Yeah, if any of you know who it was that lived at one Ava Crescent, or why he wanted to burn it, I'd be interested in finding that out. I myself have no idea. Okay, it's the Facebook post. A month before, he contacted some old friends. He's going to meet with one of his buddies on April 2nd. Stated attending Seneca was awesome and much more challenging than high school. Said he was working at a programming job for 1.5 years and stated he doesn't pretend to be afraid of girls anymore. Yeah, so he's lying his ass off here to his buddy, like, oh yeah, college is great. No, it wasn't. Wasn't working at no job for 1.5 years, and I mean, I would assume he was still afraid of girls at this point. Not clear how much of this is impression management. Yeah, no shit. Another friend seems to indicate that his behavior was just an act and was fun. Mr. Minassian agrees that it was an act, but that he can't do it anymore. So this is interviewing his parents. I didn't find this stuff particularly interesting. Okay, yes, I'm a murdering piece of shit. I'm going over the interview. Okay, I found this part funny. It's Wright reviewing the interview, and it's like, he went on to state that the goal was not to kill the normies, but to subjugate them. He mentions Pepe, seeming to be Pepe Le Pew, a Looney Tunes character who is a skunk rejected when attempting to be romantic towards cats. Yeah, so he didn't know who Pepe was, which kind of makes sense. Like, the very seasoned, forensic mental health professionals, they're getting to interview him. Like, they're old. Like, they're not going to know much about internet culture, and they don't really have much of a reason to either. You think of most of the people they're going to interview, it's going to be like, dudes who murdered their wives, dude who touched kids, stuff like that. Like, when is Pepe the Frog going to come up? Like, never. So it makes sense he doesn't know who that is, and I can imagine him just sitting there thinking, oh, Pepe. Oh, yeah, there was that skunk from Looney Tunes who wanted the cat to go out with him, and it never would. Yeah, that makes sense, this Pepe Le Pew. Man, internet culture is weird. All these kids and their cartoons, Yeah, so again, just kind of reviewing that stuff. And a little bit of new stuff, but I didn't find it interesting. So he's general observations about the video, casual and relatively anxiety-free when he's talking, knowledge of wrongfulness, the inaccuracies he put forward seem to increase his importance or related to his fantasies of his importance. Fourth, which is likely less obvious, is the more prepared nature of his statements relative to his more typical interview presentation, right? So he's interviewing him, and he's noticed, well, you seem a lot less put together than you were in that police interview. And it's like, well, yeah, he planned that shit. He's not planning what he's saying to you. Although some of his statements are on the concrete side, he is not extreme in this regard. Okay. So he had a friend named Ismail something or other. They played RuneScape together. I didn't see much that was interesting in here. There was actually a CBC podcast called Boys Like Me, where they interviewed one of his former classmates, who I think was his buddy at some point. And, the classmate was talking about his own challenges of autism and how he dealt with them and how he kind of, took a different path of wanting to help people. It was kind of it was a good podcast. It was a good story. But yeah, I don't know if anything he said is in here. I forget what his name is off the top of my head, but I'm guessing it's not. Okay, so May 2nd, 2108. It can't be May 2nd, 2018, because his attack was over. So it would have had to have been 2008, probably. A friend of Mr. Minassian's father gives a statement. He was thinking of hiring Mr. Minassian, but it appears that Mr. Minassian's demeanor led to him to not hire Mr. Minassian. Two other individuals gave similar statements concerning potentially hiring Mr. Minassian and deciding against it. So, so this was a guy you sucked in interviews. Welcome to autism. If you have awkward facial expressions or ways of talking, there are a lot of people who are going to be like, yeah, there's something wrong with that guy. I mean, yeah, he got a great resume, but not so much. It's unfortunate. Okay, cop statements. Okay, the jail records he is not suspected of mental illness. Pacing, exercising, reading, playing board games. Meeting with a psychologist described as cooperative. Admitted one day after the index offense. Okay. I don't know what Q10 monitoring is. Type notes by the CAMH staff. He denied suicidal ideation shortly before the soap incident. Well, yeah. Well, I'm not going to kill myself, honest, Makes sense. Saying with a psychiatrist and a psychologist. Described as reading, declines offers to see media. Frequently saw a psychologist, multiple books requested, no medications mentioned, had visits, declines chaplain, engaged in Sudoku, watching TV, 120 minutes out of his cell each day. Oh, that's more than I would have expected. Thanks staff frequently during some periods, exercising, segregation unit the whole time, stays comfortably in day room with a particular inmate, civil suits regarding rider rental mentioned. Declined some outings, reads The Selfish Gene. Oh, so he read Richard Dawkins in prison. Well, might as well learn stuff. But yes, they put him with another inmate. I found that interesting because I was thinking, like, well, what inmate's going to want to be with him? But then again, I remember thinking the same thing about Chris Watts, that guy in the U.S. who killed his wife and his 2 daughters. And so I figured, that guy's such a piece of shit. There's been so much media attention. Like, who are they going to be able to put him with? But it turns out what they did was they just put him with a bunch of pedophiles. And, that apparently went fine for him, Makes sense, Oh, hey, what'd you do? You killed your kids? Well, I raped my kids, so I guess we're not so different after all, Yeah, that's fucked. So, yeah, they probably put him with someone who was super fucked up and didn't care that he murdered 11 people for no reason, ran over grandmas and stuff. So I'm bringing this stuff up because I find it, interesting. You don't often hear much about what, inmates like him actually do in jail. Engaged in reading, nothing unusual, day room unlocked, a lot of abbreviations used, some stretching, some pacing, yard time, exercising, comfortable and compatible with another inmate, name redacting, some running, some watching TV, but not much. And then he fucked the dude in the ass. Or maybe it was him complaining about not being able to look at pee porn in jail. I don't know, man. Does have contact with lawyer. Who knows what that was. But yeah, no, he's doing fine with his other inmate buddy, whoever he is. Maybe that was the guy who was part of the Rosicrucian order that we saw last time. Yeah, I don't know. I was expecting this guy to get the Paul Bernardo treatment. Like, when Paul Bernardo was in jail, they literally couldn't put him with anybody. Like, initially their cells just had bars, but then what would happen was people would walk by his cell and throw bodily fluids at him. And so they put glass panes on his cell so people couldn't do that. And, they would let him out for yard, but there were other prisoner cells who were, in buildings that were above the yard. And so what they'd do is they'd wait until Paul Bernardo, walked under their cell window and then throw stuff at him so he couldn't go for yard anymore. And, they had to stop the entire movement of prisoners in the jail when they wanted to move him somewhere because they would attack him. Like, he randomly got his arm broken once. They really didn't like him. So, it's a different caliber of offense that he committed, obviously. Killing 11 people, it's fucked up, but it's not fucked up in that kind of way. So, I figured the way he was treated would be somewhat similar to that, incel who kills 11 people, but yeah, they found someone else to stick him with. Declined CBT in February of 2019. Oh, he flipped on the CBT and attended some CBT sessions. Attended sessions on empathy, engagement, conflict resolution, enhancing self-control, identifying and sharing feelings, self-talk, and moral and values. He is noted to have understood concepts and was well engaged. Yeah, like this is the kind of stuff that he should have done before. Like, it's sad that it wasn't until he went to jail that he's finally able to get CBT sessions where they teach all this stuff. Completed budgeting. Budgeting? Like, what the hell do you need to learn budgeting for, you weirdo? You're going to be in jail forever. Like, okay. Bible studies and yoga. Okay. Engaged in pacing, stretching, etc. Continued to complain about his lack of pee porn. Okay, this is the Bradford stuff. He's going over Bradford's notes. A lot of it's just a reiteration of what he was saying. Okay, this part was weird. It was in Bradford's notes, but we didn't see it before. Of interest to me, as I did not see reference to this elsewhere, is that Mr. Minassian reports that when he returned to college, his father sat with him 12 hours a day, seeming to make sure he completed his work. This could indicate that he had an increased sense that he could not complete the work alone, or it could reflect the potential for disappointing his parents through highlighting how important his success was to them. He states to kill is extremely amoral, but that he wanted to be infamous. It clearly indicates that he knew his actions were real and not a video game at the material time. So that's what Westphal was saying. Oh, it's like a video game. But he was like, no, it's not a video game. I know it's not. It was real. Yeah, the dad's sitting with him 12 hours a day. Like, didn't he work? It seems quite excessive. And, it was 25 at that point. Like, he was a grown man, and his dad sitting with him 12 hours a day to make sure he does his homework. That's pretty strange, man. Certainly shows dedication, if nothing else. Wonder why he felt that was necessary. I guess maybe they were concerned about him playing video games all day, and they were like, we want to make sure you don't do that. I don't know. So more of the same history we've seen before. He's commenting on Mammock's report now. Going over his tests again. Okay, so going over the PII that she did. The results are described in the report and indicate an individual who is unhappy, moody, has low self-esteem, feels powerless, struggles with anxiety and depression, but denies vegetative symptoms, intense and recurring suicidal ideation, in addition to a harshly negative self-concept. It is important to note that many patients with ASD who have committed offenses often struggle to report symptoms in themselves and are often more able to report external stressors. In other words, many ASD patients being assessed generate quite normal profiles due to difficulties in self-awareness. Mr. Minassian does not appear to suffer from this degree of impaired self-reflection. Yes, this seems to me to be something that would be more of an issue with people with ASD who are a lot more low functioning and don't have a lot of insight into their own thought processes. And from what I remember from the trial, this guy had done more work with more low functioning people with ASD, but not more high functioning ones. And so it kind of seems like he's expecting him to fit that pattern, but he's surprised when he does not. Okay, Chan stuff. Using a goofy voice out of fear. Okay, so here's another sort of summary that's interesting. In my opinion, Mr. Minassian's cognitive testing results indicate that under many circumstances, Mr. Minassian can see the big picture or can figure it out by logic to a large degree. In addition, as will be further discussed below, one does not have to appreciate or even understand the wrongfulness of one's own offense to be criminally responsible, but simply to know the legal and moral wrongfulness. Many personality and cognitive style attributes undermine full or complete understanding and appreciation of the harmfulness of violence, particularly in the heat of the moment, that are not impairing to the extent that they prevent from knowing the act was wrong. I would argue that the offense does not flow directly from his ASD symptoms, nor have his symptoms ever been severe enough to prevent him from knowing the act was wrong. So this is a very interesting paragraph here, and one thing that was kind of touched upon in some of the other reports. It's, there are other disorders you can have that impair your ability to empathize with other people or to understand the minds of other people. Like if you have, sociopathy, or, the more technical term for that would be antisocial personality disorder or, narcissistic personality disorder. You're going to have, diminished empathy. You're going to have a diminished ability to, understand or appreciate what's going on with other people. Or, maybe if you have some kind of disorder that, makes you more impulsive, like, ADHD, you're more likely to do something in the heat of the moment without considering the consequences or the ramifications. None of that matters, for the purpose of deciding whether you knew what you were doing is morally wrong. So this is something that kind of got brought up in the trial in which the other reports touched on. It's like, does not having cognitive empathy mean that he shouldn't be criminally responsible? And it's like, well, there are other disorders that kind of impair that to some extent, or that impair your, ability or motivation to develop it. But that doesn't matter. They still know that it's, wrong according to the law and the standards of society. So like, we don't really care about that, do we? Yeah. Or if you're someone who's normal, but who's, less empathetic, less agreeable or conscientious, maybe, less likely to think about the consequences of what you're doing just because of who you are. That's not a defense. You still know it's morally wrong. Your ability to be able to understand the consequences of your actions is impaired to some degree, arguably, but, too bad. So I think he's kind of right about that assessment of things. Like, we don't say those people are NCR. And so this is kind of the angle he's going with. Okay, maybe his ability to understand the consequences was impaired, but that doesn't matter. Okay, apparently he told Dr. Bradford that women marry up for money. Not necessarily incorrect. Although the time reference is unclear, he described having fantasies of shooting up a school. He later stated they started in 2011, although he indicated to me that these thoughts started earlier. So again, the thing I was noticed where he was changing the dates, like he's still doing that. Maybe he just doesn't remember. Dr. Bradford notes that his father also did not seem to appreciate the enormity of Mr. Minassian's offenses. Yeah, so that was kind of one thing I was wondering, like maybe his parents are kind of compartmentalizing some of this stuff because it's too painful. And when we go over Boudreau's report, we'll kind of see more about what they think. But yeah, that was something that I was interested in knowing, and we'll see more about that. Still wants a painless death. Well, he didn't give his victims that. He did an MRI of his head and didn't find anything weird. This is him reviewing Elliot Rodgers' manifesto. Comparing and contrasting them, Mr. Minassian appears to take more responsibility for his offending and does not blame it on humanity to as great an extent. Yes. Rodgers' account is more of a narcissistic flavor and more examples of narcissistic wounds. Absolutely. Jealous person, resenting his stepmother. Much greater sexual preoccupation, absolutely. I mean, all the racist stuff. Kicked out of his home, saw a counselor as an adult, viewed himself as seeing the world more clearly than others. Yeah, so Minassian was missing a lot of that stuff, which again meant that he would have been a better candidate for getting help, I think, but he didn't. On tests involving perceiving or understanding social / interpersonal implications, he talked his way towards an understanding of what he was faced with, eventually arriving at correct responses / understanding on items that most would automatically perceive very quickly. This was noted by a previous assessor in childhood and was an important aspect of his performance on the SSKAAT-R and the proverb subset of DKEFS. Lots of fun acronyms here. He continued to exhibit stiff gaze and limitations in prosody and a logic-based approach to understanding concepts. The Shipley 2, I don't know what that is. Seems kind of like general cognitive skills. Considerable intellectual potential. The block pattern things, they did things with blocks like Mamek did. I mean, I could go over this. I'm inclined not to. 4 subsets of the DKEFS, different components of executive functioning. Average to high range, did not get stuck in his own idiosyncratic thought processes. Completed the 20-question subtest, which assesses planning and stimulus-bound thinking. Performance in the average to high average ranges. Completed the proverb subtest, which assesses an individual's ability to understand non-literal concepts. He was asked to explain the underlying meaning of 8 proverbs of varying levels of difficulty. During free inquiry, some of his explanations were more based on his own personal experiences than is typical, but his eventual score was in the average range with his being able to understand and articulate non-literal meanings of the proverbs. On the multi-choice phase, he was able to rapidly and perfectly recognize the correct interpretation of all the proverbs, again in the average range. I'd be curious what those proverbs were. Yeah, so it makes sense he'd be drawing on his own personal experiences more because he isn't as worldly, doesn't have as much social experience, or probably isn't as well read either. I would imagine he doesn't really strike me as the type to go out and read a lot about politics or history or philosophy or just random stuff. He seems more of a guy who's into school and more technical things. Mr. Minassian completed 2 subtests of the SSKAAT-R. This test was designed to assess sexual knowledge and judgment in the intellectual disability population. Clearly, Mr. Minassian is not a member of this group, but this measure uses visual and scenario descriptions of social sexual judgment situations, allowing a window into thought processes in these domains. Again, Mr. Minassian was very verbal as to his thought processes as he completed the test. He completed the intimacy and healthy boundaries subtests. Completing the test required much longer than typical due to Mr. Minassian's engaging in in-depth analysis and discussions of many of the stimuli in terms of cultural factors, people's assumptions, and what each party might be thinking. Although he was able to score almost perfectly, he needed to observe the picture for long periods and engage in a range of internal discussions before perceiving the inappropriate aspects of the scenarios depicted. That would be easily perceived by most in seconds. He was clearly aware of all the basic issues of consent, inappropriateness of incest, sexual assault, sex with minors, etc., even though he struggled to perceive these concepts in visual form. Interesting. So that might speak more to his, relationship sexual issues. And, it's something that was intended for people with disabilities, but he still had trouble with it. So, I think I saw a video on this earlier, like a video of them doing the test. I thought it might, or not of Minassian doing the test, but of, someone showing how the test works. So I thought it might be interesting to show it to you, so I'll sidetrack you for a sec. Okay, so here we go. This is the test. One of the things it's used on is sex offenders with disabilities who, due to their low functioning or other issues that happen, might not necessarily have a complete understanding of why what they did was wrong. So the point of this is to be like, hey, did you know this was wrong? Did you know that was wrong? Just to kind of gauge where they're at. I'm not sure why they used this on him, but anyway, so we're going to see some examples of what it's used for in some of the pictures. Yeah, so these are all the things that can go wrong. We're not talking about sex offenders, so I'm not going to go into all this stuff.
Maybe some legal implications that have to do with the accuracy of the report.
Okay, so
for therapy is concept.
Okay, so this is one of the pictures they show you. Oh, Jesus. Yeah, when I first saw this, I was like, fuck, man, this is child porn. But so they're showing you this picture and being like, hey, is this wrong? And like, if you're a functioning adult, you're going to be able to figure that out immediately. But he had to talk his way through some of the pictures in order to figure it out. Like, oh, what's going on? And, is that wrong? I'm not sure. I mean, he got the correct answer eventually. But Yeah, that's kind of weird. I mean, that would speak to him being more low functioning if he didn't have this immediate gut reaction of like, this is fucked. Oh.
In this issue, we're examining legal consent, and we're trying to determine if the individual understands the concept that legal consent occurs without bribery. The question is asked is this okay for a person to do? But is it okay if the individual does it if he gives him $50?
Yeah, I can't say that's ever happened to me. Just taking a leak in the bathroom. Hey, can I touch your butt if you give me $50? I mean, like, you know, I mean, if you're a normal person, this stuff is weird, but like, you know, some people legitimately don't understand that because they're just too disabled. I mean, I don't understand why they did this on Minassian. Like, he's obviously not low functioning enough for this would be an obvious problem. But, you know, I guess they just wanted to see, you know, how is he going to be able to process stuff like this?
In this case, we're looking at legal consent from the position that a person who is entrusted with the care of the individual should not be in a position to have sexual contact with that individual.
Okay, so we got a doctor who rapes his patient and actual rape. Okay. See, again, you know, you're a normal person looking at that. You're going to be able to tell within like less than a second, like, hey, this is fucked. That's not okay at all. But he had to talk his way through it. You know, he wasn't immediately obvious to him that that was wrong. Okay, so I got a case example of someone who has it. We got any more of the pictures here? Let's. Actually, is there any more interesting shit here? The graphic profile. Well, it was graphical, right? Integrating result. This is just shit about how it's scored. Healthy boundaries.
The person I know, you mean? Not the person you know the most, but the person who...
Oh, we've got someone who's actually disabled filling it out, and they're... okay, I mean, I could show you what they all do with this person, but what the... What was that? Oh, gay rape. Yeah, see, yeah, is that okay, kids? No. Oh, there was another one there. Oh, looks like a dude by himself there. Wait.
Is a nuke staff counselor, and he hugs Paula when no one else is around, and he tries to touch her breasts. Mm-hmm. Is it okay for a staff counselor to touch Paula's breasts?
Her breasts? I don't think so.
That was a good answer.
And what's your
yeah. Okay. What else? What else we got here? Oh, what is this? Is that voyeurism? Looks like voyeurism. Yeah, maybe I'm disabled because I can't figure out what's wrong with this. Like, oh, okay, there's the voyeurism one. Yes, this is bad.
See what the other person's doing.
Okay, so what's wrong with that picture?
So far, at the end here, your blinds were closed to have privacy, but over here, your blinds or curtains are not closed if you need privacy and someone's looking into you.
Okay, so she didn't quite get that one. You know, you're supposed to close your blinds to have privacy, but she wasn't able to figure out. Well, that's why you do it. Okay, so what else? Okay, yeah, I censored the one on the bottom right for YouTube. It's sex, so can't show that. Okay. All right, well, that was it. All right, yeah, so like we saw there that, you know, there are things that would, you know, to a functioning adult would be immediately obvious or wrong. So, yeah, like the fact that he had to talk himself through it and be like, you know, well, what does society think about this? What's happening in the picture? You know, what's the moral view about this? Like, it shows that he isn't intuitive about stuff like this. Like, he can't just immediately figure it out the way a normal person can. He has to sit down and be, okay, what's going on? What are the people involved? You know, yeah, that's kind of strange, actually. In-depth analysis and discussions of many of the stimuli in terms of cultural factors, people's assumptions what each party might be thinking. Yeah, that's kind of a no-brainer. Like, is it okay to grab some dude's ass when you're taking a leak at a urinal? No. We could get into a long conversation about why, but most people wouldn't feel a need to. Yeah, and so he actually had to do all that before figuring out it was inappropriate. But yeah, he was aware of all the things it's saying. He just had to figure out what was going on before he could do it, which I don't know if that's a cognitive empathy thing. That's something else. Yeah, I don't know. That's quite strange. Okay, I didn't score high on the malingering test. Okay, clinical findings. Okay, we're nearing the end of the report now, and so clearly on the high functioning end of this diagnosis, as many have limited or no language, severely impaired social presentation, require a high level of supervision and oversight. Right, so that's kind of speaking to the fact that he's used to dealing with people who are more low functioning, because he's generalizing from his experiences with such. Able to maintain friendships with like-minded males, complete high school and a college program, and score at or above average on virtually all intellectual measures he faced. Though his presentation clearly points to an ASD symptom set, this is not limited his ability to master most tasks of adult living, save and except feeling socially accepted and obtaining an intimate partner. Although I would agree at times he exhibited concrete thinking, I cannot point to in my assessment any particular social concept or expectation that he could not understand on an intellectual level. This appears similar to other assessors who do not describe any specific social concept that Mr. Minassian does not appear to understand, other than the negative emotional impact his crimes had on the victims and their families. Okay, so he's talking about how he's similar to other school shooters. Number of attributes associated with school shooters in the literature. This includes described by peers as a loner, history of being bullied, engaging in a lot of fantasy, being preoccupied with weapons, attending army training, feeling like a social outcast, etc. Yeah, I don't actually know how common the army training thing is overall. Yeah, there are a few American ones that I think did the same thing. Yeah, I'm not sure. Under the Malloy 2001 classification system, he would be classified as a classroom avenger. This subgroup is more likely to be engrossed in violent fantasies, ponder the event prior to the shooting, and more likely view bullying as a major factor in their motives. Subgroup is likely to suffer from some degree of depression and struggle in bonding with others. Their self-image likely vacillates between self-reproach and self-aggrandizing. Lengthy criminal histories are rare, but nihilistic worldviews are common. Classroom avenger is the most likely group to copycat a widely publicized school shooting, according to some authors, due to their fantasy orientation, making them more unlikely to escape into fantasy involving the famous event, feeling the urge to act on their own resentment. To me, it is important to note that these offenders have been described as describing their offenses in a detached and chilling manner. As such, there is a risk that Mr. Minassian's level of empathy for the victims of his offenses flows not simply from his ASD, but quite possibly from factors associated with the school shooting constellation as well. So this is strange. He's basically treating this category of school shooter as if it's like a disorder. Yeah, so I forget, I should look up the Malloy thing, actually. Hang on. Okay, so Reed Malloy is a forensic psychologist who's been studying school shooters for a few decades, and he came up with this way of classifying them all. Yeah, and so one of the reasons why his work was important was because before that, people didn't really understand why mass murderers did what they did, and one of the stereotypes was that they were, otherwise normal people who would just snap, the expression going postal comes from that, you have a guy with a high stress job, he gets to a point where he has like a nervous breakdown of some kind, and he's like, screw this shit, I'm going to kill all these people, and then he goes and kills them, and even though it was something that he had never thought about before. But what the research he did and others after him did found was that mass shooters are often fantasizing about or even planning their attacks years beforehand. It's not just a going postal thing. There may be, some event that kind of pushes them into the territory of, okay, I'm going to go do it now. But it's not just a thing that happens out of the blue usually. Another stereotype was that, these people must all be crazy, which makes sense, because it seems crazy to a normal person. But again, one thing that was has been found by researchers since he started his work was that a significant proportion of them aren't crazy at all. They're not mentally ill. They have other reasons for doing it. And so there's this classification system that, he came up with. So it kind of encompasses the different motivations people can have for becoming a mass shooter. And there are some of them, like the Classroom Avenger, where they have these, grievances against, particular people or against society that they've been, nurturing for years. And then eventually they're just like, I'm going to go do something about it. I've been bullied for years. I've been treated badly for years. I've been thinking about doing something for years. I'm going to do it, And so, the danger of creating any profile is that, nobody's going to fit it perfectly, or very few people. They've been trying to profile mass shooters for years, trying to find out all the warning signs so they can stop it from happening. And it's a far more dynamic thing than that. But, these categories can be helpful, certainly. Yeah, so he acknowledges that his issues with his autism were kind of a factor in what led him to become angry. What happened with girls was unfair, as well as the ostracism he received. So, you could kind of weave this thread through the things he said. Yeah, because, I've noticed this myself in going over these reports. He does seem a lot like this particular category of people, nurturing these grievances for a long time, thinking about shooting them as a way of making himself feel better. And then, eventually he does something like that. He gets to a point where he's like, I don't want to deal with this anymore. I'm going to do it. Unlike many school shooters, he did not seek an accomplice. Yeah, I wonder if that's something that's actually kind of gone down in frequency over the years. I'm inclined to say it has, just based on, cases I've randomly seen of this over the years. You see this in terrorism too. There's more of a gravitation towards lone wolf attacks because, you don't have to have a whole bunch of people organizing or financing stuff. You just, radicalize people over the internet, and then just individual people who aren't on anybody's radar will go out and do stuff. So that's useful if you're a terrorist and you want to cause trouble. And yeah, mass shooters, it kind of seems to be a similar pathway. They go on these extreme websites where people glorify these types of things, and they're like, I want to do that. And no one has to groom them or finance them or anything. They just end up wanting to do it themselves based on what they see. It's a different world than it used to be, certainly. Again, not clear to me what concepts, interpersonal concept doesn't understand. Yeah, so he's basically saying, he understands every social concept I've thrown at him. He's intellectually high functioning. I don't see how he can be NCR. And, the other stuff is irrelevant. Okay, so yeah, he's kind of saying what I've been getting at, that he's not as narcissistic as Elliot Rodger and, would have been a better candidate for help. It's just too late now. Interesting here. In simplest terms, although he has some impetus on the drive side of the mass murder offense pattern, his level of drive did not appear in keeping with his actions. Fueling by incel reading and his ASD symptoms likely eroded the control side of the equation, leading to this tragedy. So I guess what he's trying to say here is that he didn't seem angry and motivated enough to actually do it. I mean, given what he said about how he thought and all the things he was dealing with and, this looming sense of failure he was having, what he did makes sense. If you accept that, that was how he thought and that was going on. Yeah, I don't know what he means by this. What was he? Is he saying that he wasn't angry enough or didn't, care enough? So that was the end of Wright's report. Okay, so we moved on to Boudreau's report here. Interviewed as Minassian's father, mother, his brother, and Ismail, his friend. Yeah, so some basic stuff here. Okay. 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Oh, weird. So they're just interviewing the friend for 5-minute blocks. That's quite strange. Father was interviewed for 2 hours. Yes, I mentioned earlier that his parents kind of answered in a strange way. Even the writer noticed he appeared to be somewhat guarded. Regarding whether Mr. Minassian would seek out the support of him and Mom if something was bothering him, Dad explained, that's a generic question. It's also one of those things that I might not necessarily remember. At Dad's request, writer clarified the question, provided examples of how some individuals may seek emotional support in times of emotional dysregulation. Dad explained, in general, I don't know if I guess this is true of kids on the spectrum. He's not that talkative, he's very literal. Provide an extreme example indicating that Mr. Minassian would ask for help in some situations, such as if he fell and broke his leg. However, he would not volunteer information in other situations, which he attributed to Mr. Minassian's experience with autism spectrum disorder. yeah, so he's making a point of asking him to clarify the questions and get into specifics and, extreme example, general statements, right? So he's trying to avoid, my guess here is that he's trying to avoid being, trapped into, answering in a way that's not favorable. Yeah, so I mean, like it's the Crown's expert, so my guess would be that Minassian's parents were, briefed by his lawyer and being like, well, okay, you don't want to say things they might take the wrong way. You want to make sure you know what they're asking. What would indicate something is bothering Mr. Minassian? That's an even more difficult question. I mean, does anyone know? Like, how do you know if your spouse had a bad day at work? Well, I mean, you ask her how her day was. Less talkative, somewhat more withdrawn that day, get shorter answers. Those are examples. Not saying it was specifically like that with him. I mean, that's how you know a person, their general mood, their sense of humor, and so on. Yeah, so like, again, he's just giving general... Yeah, this is weird. He again reiterated Mr. Minassian's experience interacting with others as it relates to his experience with ASD. Yeah, so it's like, oh, this is what his autism makes him do. This is what his autism makes him do. And, oh, yeah, here's some general examples, but, they may not necessarily apply to him. I'm just saying. Okay. Mr. Minassian is like, as a person, Dad stated, what aspect are we talking about? Like physical, athletic ability? It's a very vague question you're talking about. Specifically regarding his personality, if I could use one word to describe him, I would use gentle. He's a very extremely gentle person, very non-confrontational, very easy to get along with. When asked what he believes his best qualities were, he emphasized the vagueness of the question while also noting, I want to be clear that I'm not trying to be difficult or to stall. I want to be careful and make sure I understand the questions. Definitely anyone that knows Alek, I'm sure they'll agree he's a very gentle person. The only thing, if you know him, because of being on the spectrum, he's always had difficulty interacting. Let me define that. Some people would be very comfortable socializing with other people in a family gathering. Alek doesn't do small talk, for example. If you engage him in a conversation, he would answer. How much of an answer you would get would largely depend on how much he was interested in the subject or how knowledgeable. Yeah, so again, kind of stressing the ASD angle and... gentle, non-confrontational. So he's heading home with that. About his interests. Writer queried what Dad would change about Mr. Minassian if he could. I'm not sure if I want to answer that in that way. To be honest, I think it's somewhat of an irrelevant question. It's hurtful for someone to ask that question. If your question was slightly different, it's a little offensive, to be honest. People are what they are. If you're asking me if I wish he didn't have this neurological disorder, I'm going to say yes. That should be obvious. It would be this disorder. I wish it wasn't there. Given the circumstances, it is the obvious answer, and in this context, I don't fail to see the purpose this question serves. Yeah, so again, like most people, if they were asked that question, they'd be like, well, I'd change this or I'd change that. Like, they just say whatever came to their head. But it's like, oh, I'm offended you asked that question. Oh, I wish you didn't have autism. It's all about, autism, right? And not more personality-related questions, which I would kind of, or, things he did, which I'm assuming the writer was hoping to get out of him. But it's just, I changed it so he doesn't have autism. It's like, that's a nice answer you can't possibly interpret in any bad way. So, I mean, like, obviously his parents are concerned about him and what's going to happen to him. But, like, yeah, when I was skimming this before, I did find this kind of suspicious. That stuff about his history. Whether Mr. Minassian found it challenging to follow rules as a child. So, again, I can't say yes or no. It depends on the activity, the time period. I can give examples. Okay, needed help putting his shoes and coat on in kindergarten. I'm not sure how that's relevant. Delayed speech. Okay, it's kind of going off on stuff that doesn't get to the heart of the question. Any challenges Mr. Minassian had with rule violation were not due to disrespect of authority or a challenging presentation, but difficulty understanding directions as it relates to his experience with ASD. Casually speaking is kind of lost on him, noting Mr. Minassian would respond more appropriately to direct commands. I didn't find this stuff interesting. It's just it's history getting help. You can pause it if you want to. Dad denied Mr. Minassian ever initiated fights as a child, adding, if the situation was not so sad, I would laugh at the suggestion. Definitely teased, actively involved with the school system to make sure it didn't happen. Teachers were keeping an eye on it and would notify us so that he's not basically being harassed. From what Alek Minassian said, it kind of seems like he was teased throughout his entire childhood. So, I mean, it doesn't seem like this really did much good for him. He noted that he and Mom met with school staff regularly. Mr. Minassian's response ranged from ignoring them to laughing at it. I don't think he ever started crying or anything like that. Laughed to just try and get along. Guess he didn't know about the crying about girls thing. Trauma or abuse, history of mental health issues. Yeah, like, again, this is all stuff we've seen before. When asked whether he believes Mr. Minassian has a mental illness or seemed mentally unwell, Dad expressed, "I don't think that's a very fair question to ask. Frankly, I'm quite shocked that you would ask me a question like that, because we're not medical professionals to make these determinations." And there's stuff about his history of being diagnosed with autism. Yes, this is a very lawyery answer. It's like, well, I'm not a professional. I don't know. And again, the answer most people would give there is just, no, or I don't know, or maybe. But you can see how that could potentially harm them, right? Because if they were to say yes and, they get it wrong, it doesn't line up with what the doctor said. It's like, oh, they don't know what's going on. You can't trust what they say. And if they say no and the doctors find out he has one, oh, same thing, They say, I don't know. It's like, well, hey, we can't rely on what you're saying. You don't know. Right. So there are all sorts of ways that they could be trapped here. If they give the kind of sincere answers most people would give in this situation. And so it's like, well, not a fair question to ask. Hey, I'm not a professional. I can't say if he's mentally ill, which is true. And they're not really saying anything they could attack there. It's just like, we're not qualified. And here are those things that objectively happened. Here are the objective facts. Here's all the help he got when he was a kid, and that's what happened. And he's not even saying, I don't know if he has a mental illness. It's like, how would I know that? Everything's possible. If you're asking me if it's possible, how can I know? I'm at a loss of how I would be able to say if he has a mental illness, right? So, yeah. But the way Boudreau's coming at it is basically trying to find every possible thing wrong. Yeah, so you can kind of, if you pause and read all this stuff, you can kind of get that sense. Regarding any changes he observed in Mr. Minassian when he saw him in the days following the index offense, Dad stated, it's not like one specific event, but just, we've seen the police video interrogation of the interview they did. We see him there, so of course we go to visit him. The general sensation we get is that he's completely detached from reality. When I watch that video, of course, it's very shocking watching that. Once that initial shock is gone and I watched it again, it's like he seems completely, from my perspective, completely detached from reality, as if he didn't understand what was happening there. When we go visit him, we certainly don't get the impression it's someone who's done something of this magnitude. He continues to be his gentle self. It's very puzzling to us. He continues to be very gentle and polite, the Alek that we knew. It's very weird. It's impossible, but it happened. So there could be a bit of an indication here that they actually believe Westfall's theory. And aren't just saying that because, they want him to get a favorable report. And you can understand why a parent would think that, because like he hid all these, fantasies and these desires from everybody for so long. And like all his parents would have known is, well, okay, he got bullied in school and, girls didn't want to be around him and he didn't have many friends and everything was hard. And, he's nice and polite at home and, when they're, out in public together, presumably. So they would never have seen any of this coming, given the fact that he hid all of these feelings of anger and these fantasies that he had and these desires he had. To do the things he did, is going on incel sites and stuff. And so like their, incredulity here is quite understandable. Like I feel quite bad for them. And yes, they only saw the parts of him that he showed to people and not the ones that he didn't show. And, they're visiting him in jail and, he's still superficially the same person, it seems, talking the same way, having the same kinds of conversations. So you can understand, why this theory would be appealing to someone in that situation. Your kid does something absolutely horrible like that. You don't expect, you don't see coming at all. And, you got someone like Dr. Westphal coming along and saying, well, he's just detached from reality. He didn't know any better. He had an autistic way of thinking similar to psychosis. It would be comforting to believe that, regardless of whether it's true. Yeah, not a position you want to be in as a parent. It's pretty much the worst possible thing that could happen. In that video, it's like it's not even him, like he's completely detached from reality, like he's talking about a movie, like it's not real life. So the reason I'm saying that is he doesn't express emotion too much, but the way he's saying that, he's like a robot. He's completely unaware of the magnitude of it. So now he's being asked, does he understand the magnitude of it now? And he's like, I don't know, I'm not in his mind, it's hard to express. Sometimes I get the feeling that no, he doesn't understand it. That's the sensation we get when we see him. We haven't talked to him about the incident because we know that given the medical assessments are being done, we didn't want to sort of interfere with that in any shape or form. So for that reason, we haven't talked to him about it. Just how he is when we visit him, we go home, we look at each other, and it's like we have to pinch each other. Like he's gone for a small crime, I'll be gone for 6 months. So I guess he's acting normal. And Yeah, not wanting to interfere with the assessment. Like, that kind of makes sense. You don't want to seed ideas into his head or tell him that, there's a correct way of thinking or there's a correct thing to say. And, again, if he answered unfavorably, it could ruin it. And they'd be like, well, what did he say? Oh, yeah, he said it was great. He said he loved running over all the women and stuff. Like, if he was on, if that was what was going on, he was honest, right? Like, so, yeah. I remember one time he asked, has this incident impacted you guys in any way, shape, or form? He asked that, like he seems completely oblivious to the fact that he's turned her life upside down. Yeah, so that's kind of the lack of insight, because like he isn't going to see the impact it has on his parents. He just sees them going to visit him in the jail and, trying their hardest not to look sad and horrified and whatever, like the mother's strained smile, right? Like they're putting on a brave face, I would assume, when they're going. And so like he's not seeing what it's doing to them. He's not seeing what it's doing to other people. He doesn't get to see any of that. He just sits in his jail cell by himself and, maybe he sees a news story and, an interview, but the actual effects of what he's done, like he's not able to see that. And this is one of the long-standing criticisms of the justice system. It places the focus on, the offender and, punishing the offender and keeping them in jail and not so much, emphasizing the harm they've done and trying to do any kind of restorative justice, if you will. It's not really relevant in this case because he's never getting out. But yeah, that is a concern a lot of victims' rights groups have too. Victims are often kind of an afterthought. It's all these it's all this pageantry kind of focused on punishing the offender, trying the offender, sentencing the offender, and it's all about what happens to them and what they did, and this was around the time he was being assessed by the doctors, so I guess this was prompted by a question asked by the doctors. That's my guess. He came out and asked us and was very curious to know. He doesn't seem to understand. In some ways, he's very immature and capable of understanding certain things. I don't know. It is interesting looking at what this guy has to say, because there are some ways in which he does seem quite low functioning. Other ways where he had a very sophisticated understanding of a lot of different things. It makes it hard to really gauge how to view what he's doing. Yeah, so this is his quote that got repeated in the paper, I think. To me, the best I can describe this is being hit by lightning on his sunny day twice. I wish I knew what happened. There's nothing I can think of that would lead to this. I say this with all honesty. If the police came to us and knocked on our door that day and told us your son has been arrested for punching someone, given his personality and the way he was, the most gentle person you could think of, no hint of aggression, to even think of him punching someone in the face, let alone this, it is totally, totally incomprehensible. So that kind of was something I touched upon in the first video. He was someone who was afraid of that kind of direct confrontation, punching someone in the face. Well, they might get mad at you and punch you back, and people will be mad at you that you broke the rules. But, if he's in his van, running people over, it happens instantly. He doesn't have to deal with the aftermath of what he did. Doesn't have to deal with the consequences or people getting mad at him because he thinks he's going to die immediately afterwards. So it's a way of breaking rules for someone who's afraid of breaking rules. It seems to me, and maybe that was why it appealed to him. Yeah, this is him reiterating this kind of stuff. This is his mother, interviewed for 1 hour and 45 minutes. Okay. Again, gentle person, doesn't argue, doesn't get into trouble. When asked if there was something she would change about Mr. Minassian if she could, she stated, all I could say is he's my baby, I love him, and I'm going to leave it at that. This is an interesting thing to wonder. When there's some parents that will disown their children if they do stuff like this, like, you're horrible, I never want to talk to you. And there are other ones that'll, stick it through to the end, no matter how horrible what they do is. It's not really my place to say whether that's a good thing to do or not in this case. More stuff about his history. Endorsed that he threw temper tantrums, small ones. He would refuse to eat or refuse to move. He would just stand there or sit there. Yeah, he would cry. Regarding things that would upset Mr. Minassian to cause a temper tantrum, Mom stated, one thing that comes to my mind first and foremost was missing his favorite TV shows. He really liked to be at home on time, watch from the first credits, from the first thing that comes up. He wanted to see all that. She advised he stop throwing temper tantrums between 10 and 12 years of age, which is way too old to be doing that. And that's a very autism thing. You have to see your TV show from beginning to end or you'll have a meltdown. It's what I would expect of, a kid with autism or, someone who's more low functioning. Mom denied Mr. Minassian ever did dangerous or impulsive things for fun, initiated fights, engaged in vandalism, set fires, or made up stories, or ran away from home. She maintained he was bullied, however, she reportedly could not remember what the bullying entailed. So I found that kind of questionable. Like, you're with your husband, at the school, talking to the school about the bullying literally all the time, pretty much. And you don't remember what any of it was. Yeah, that's strange to me. Okay, more about the history. Again, you can pause. I didn't find this interesting. I'm informed Mr. Minassian has held office jobs, all the jobs he's been in the office, co-op, denied knowing why he was fired. So I guess they didn't have that conversation. Denied he ever had challenges with supervisors or with coworkers. Well, I mean, he did because of the RuneScape. Regarding whether Mr. Minassian ever had a female supervisor, she reported yes. As far as I know, he had no problem with that. So she knows that specific thing, but not why he was fired. Interesting. Military, hobbies, regarding whether Mr. Minassian feels he needs to change the way he speaks or acts when around women, Mom conveyed, I wouldn't know if he felt that way, but other than that, you could say he was shy and people had commented about it. In terms of any specific comments she remembers, Mom stated, I don't really remember. All I remember is the gist of it, that he was shy. She denied Mr. Minassian ever made comments about women working in or involved with the criminal justice system. That's a very strange, random thing to be in there. Like, did someone accuse him of this at some point? Like, did he, say offensive things to the female guards? Like, I don't know, man. I don't know where that would have come from. Concerning whether Mr. Minassian ever felt lonely or rejected, Mom expressed, I honestly don't know because he kept to himself and wouldn't share his emotions, wouldn't share what's on his mind. I wouldn't know. Yeah, so I mean, it's a bit of a contrast to Elliot Rodger, who, would literally call his mom up crying, oh, I'm never going to lose my virginity, Mom, and would just bellyache constantly about this kind of stuff to his parents. But yeah, Mr. Minassian keeping to himself would make sense. Like, it's looking like from this, like he really didn't tell them much of anything, even things that were benign. Like, oh, I'm lonely. I mean, that's not a bad thing. People aren't going to get mad at you. But, it could have been he just wasn't really the kind of person who cared about that kind of support, or maybe he just didn't want them to be worried, didn't want them to think less of him. Like, there are all sorts of reasons there. But yeah, I mean, they're coming at it from this position, it seems, of like we really didn't know what was going on with him. Right. Okay, so again, the mental illness question. I don't want to speculate, but I can give you the facts. He was diagnosed on the spectrum, diagnosed as an autistic child, so I can tell you the facts and emphasize that, yes, he has always exhibited the autistic characteristics of a child that is on the spectrum. So again, very, very careful answer here that, they can't really attack, and which is going to be favorable to the Westfall perspective, certainly. Yeah, again, same stuff we saw before. Mom denied he ever exhibited issues relating to anger. He never got easily angered. The favorite TV show thing again. Make him very worried or angry if we weren't home to set it up on time. Okay, so he would have been a little kid because he couldn't set it up himself. He loved Mr. Bean. Regarding whether she noticed anything different about Mr. Minassian when she saw him after the index offense, she explained, I mean, obviously he's been through a lot, so yes, it was showing on his face, definitely. He'd been through a lot, and I was myself in shock. So all I can remember is to say that his face was the face of a person who has been through a lot. That's all I can remember. And like I said, I myself was in a shock, so I can't remember exactly, can't remember exactly. So that's another thing too, like his parents, would have been, deeply traumatized by what happened, and they're kind of seeing him in jail through this lens of, trauma and incredulity. Like, how could he possibly have done all this stuff? How can he be so calm? And that's going to, mess with them, obviously. It's going to affect how they see things and what they can remember. In the face of a person who's been through a lot, so it's not neutral. It's just, I've seen some shit, which indeed he had. And it was he who did all of it. Okay, I have no idea why a gentle, easygoing person can end up in this situation, and hoping the medical assessments would shed a light on this. Shock and surprise are understatements. I just don't know how this can happen to a person that Alek has been. If he had shown any signs or anything I can put my finger on and say, that was it, but no. We're talking about a gentle, non-confrontational, non-argumentative person. So impossible. How is it possible? How is this happening? I'm trying to come to terms with that. So it's a very different profile of a mass murderer. Like some of them are, juvenile delinquents, and they're doing, horrible stuff and, things that might make people think, oh yeah, he's going to be a mass murderer, like, when they're kids, like years before they do anything. Like the Nicholas Cruz case has been in the news recently, and yeah, he was certainly like that. But some people aren't, I mean, some people spend their whole lives and just keeping all this stuff inside. They never tell anyone, and then it boils over, and it's like, how'd that happen? One thing I remember being said in the trial, I forget who it was that said this, but it was that he had compartmentalized all of his thoughts about how he would hurt his victims in the same way that a pedophile does. And maybe that's a kind of a better analogy, because, pedophiles, like, that nobody knows they're pedophiles. They hide it from everybody. And sometimes, it's like, yeah, okay, the weird old man who lives by himself in that house, and, you always knew something was off about him, but, you weren't sure. But, some of them aren't like that. Some of them are, to all appearances, normal people. No one would ever suspect that they would do something like that. And then, they get arrested, and it's like, they touched all these kids. They had all this child porn, and, nobody expects it to happen. So like there's no one profile, there's no one set of warning signs, there's nothing that's going to clearly indicate, okay, he's going to be a mass murderer. Like there's enough, diversity and divergence there that you have no way of knowing. And, you're going to have people who have the warning signs, but I mean, most of those people aren't going to do it. Most juvenile delinquents who are, doing all the fighting and the rule breaking and all the stuff they're trying to ask them questions about, like most of those people aren't going to commit mass murder. I mean, they might be petty criminals. They might not end up doing anything of any significance. And that's kind of the issue with this. Like, you have no way of really knowing, that a guy who's saying all the hateful things on the internet, like Nicholas Cruz was, like, is that just, some kid in his basement who's going to eventually grow out of it and that'll be it? Or is he going to be the next mass murderer? Like, you don't know. Or maybe it'll be someone who's not on anybody's radar at all, like was the case here. It was very similar to Elliot Rodger in that sense too. His parents said the same thing about him. Oh, he was, a gentle, sweet boy. I never expected him to do that. And what was it his dad said? He wouldn't hurt a flea. Well, obviously not. But yeah, maybe they're being guarded, and maybe they're trying to get this assessment to go a certain way. But I mean, they obviously love their son, and this is every parent's nightmare. So like, I can't, I can't be too upset about that here, if that is what they're doing. Okay, so this is his brother's interview here, interviewed for 1 hour and 10 minutes. I didn't really find much that was interesting in here, just some of the stuff they would do that was touched upon before. His hobbies and stuff. Oh yeah, so he's talking about the temper tantrums when he was 10 and 12. So yeah, the fact that he corroborated it suggests that, it's parents weren't just exaggerating it. I guess you could be conspiratorial and be like, they planned this, but I think this is probably what happened. Crying and screaming was so long ago. The only trigger he could remember was Mr. Minassian losing to him while playing video games. Okay, kind of immature. Yeah. Okay, brother maintained he saw Mr. Minassian get teased by other children a couple times, noting this was at school because there were a couple years we went to the same school. He described the teasing as, I guess, like name-calling, things like that, and I would kind of step in and tell him to back off. Well, that's a good brother. There were also a couple incidents where I don't know if you'd say they got physical. Other kids would throw tennis balls at him. Regarding Mr. Minassian's response, brother declared actually there would be no response at all. He would literally just be sitting there while tennis balls were thrown at him. He would literally just be sitting there doing nothing. So that's kind of sad. I mean, like he'd been, beaten down to the point where it's like, okay, I can't do anything to stop this. I'm just going to sit there while they throw these tennis balls at me. And I seem to recall in the early reports, he said it was never physical, but they're throwing tennis balls at him, and a couple of times too. So yeah, it's kind of messed up. Yeah. Well, yeah. Let's get our tennis balls and, peg the autistic kid. Like, yeah, not cool. Okay, more of the same we've seen before. There wasn't too much in here that hasn't been gone over. In terms of Mr. Minassian's presentation when brother first saw him after the index offense, and whether he noticed a difference in his brother explained, I mean, the thing is, I do visit him on pretty much a weekly basis. I talk to him the same way I've always talked to him. I never really asked him anything about the incident. To me, he just seems like the brother I've always known. Seems like the same Alek. Yeah, so I'm wondering if they were specifically told not to ask him about the incident, because you'd think that's something most people would ask. Like, you see him in jail, it's like, why would you do that? Yeah. It's been almost 2 years now, and it still seems so surreal. There was no indication or hint. I would never in a million years think this could happen. We were really, really close, always got along. To see that something like this could happen when it doesn't seem like something Alek could do something like this. Regarding whether Mr. Minassian appreciates the gravity of his actions related to the index offense, brother stated, again, like, I don't know, I guess for him to be able to do something like this, I guess he doesn't understand or appreciate what he did. I don't know. Brother denied having any last words or summative thoughts about Mr. Minassian or the index offense. And that was it. So, yeah, maybe a bit less prepared than the parents. So you haven't talked to it. You don't know what's going on about it. But, oh, yeah, I guess he doesn't understand or appreciate what he did. Yeah, so kind of touched on the direction they were going with, but expresses uncertainty. Yeah, he grew up with this guy. He, took him out, went to bars, went for sushi and stuff, and it's just, again, like, where did that come from? Like, he didn't see it either. Yeah. There was one thing I heard about Elliot Rodger a while back that I never confirmed. It was that, he was going on all these hate sites, and his dad did a news interview where he was like, "Oh yeah, I told him not to go on there. It's horrible and whatever." But there's something about Elliot Rodger saying that he didn't really care when he told him. I would need to reread his manifesto again, but yeah, I mean, like his father did seem kind of more of a more slick in that sense, the kind of person who is very media savvy and who knows how to smooth things over when he's talking to journalists. But these people are computer programmers, and I haven't really seen much of his parents, so I can't really speak to what I think they're like and what I think's going on. But I mean, yeah, they could have been withholding information here. Could have also not been. I don't know, but. Yeah, certainly a very sad situation to be in. Okay, so we're back with Woodside's report here. Okay. So he just has some comments on Bradford's report here. Yeah, so Bradford was saying that autism could conceivably be something you could be NCR'd for. I forget off the top of my head if Woodside disagreed with that. Okay, so he appended Wright's report. Okay, I guess that's the summary from Wright's report that we've seen. Okay, just going over the same stuff as before. What he looked like at the time. There's some background stuff about autism. Oh yeah, so it's the way they classify severity now with autism spectrum disorder is level 1 to 3. So instead of autism, high functioning autism, Asperger's, trying to classify it that way, it's just levels. Level 1 is the mildest level, which is what I have. Okay, yeah. So this is why this case was interesting. There was never a case in Canada before where autism. Spectrum disorder, specifically Asperger's, had been used as an NCR defense. There's never been an autism NCR defense in Canada, so we were in new territory with this. Going over the NCR criteria. Little to no information suggestive of Mr. Minassian being rendered incapable of appreciating the nature and quality of his actions at the material time. Rather, the information available to me points to a great deal of planning on Mr. Minassian's part regarding the alleged offenses, and he was specifically able to appreciate both the nature of his actions, driving a vehicle into pedestrians, and the quality of his actions insofar as he has repeatedly indicated in interviews that he intended to kill as many people as possible by doing so. So yeah, he knew what he was doing. Like that part was never really in doubt here. Regarding the second branch of the test, capacity to know the wrongfulness of his actions or omissions, once again, there's little to no information to suggest such an incapacity in this case. Yeah, so the way the Canadian legal system works in this area is that you're assumed to be criminally responsible, and you have to prove that you're not criminally responsible in order to be found NCR. In this regard, Mr. Minassian has clearly indicated his awareness that his actions in the alleged offenses were both illegal. He was aware he would likely spend the rest of his life in jail if he did not die at the time of the alleged offenses, and morally wrong insofar as he's indicated he knew at the time of the offenses that most people in the community would find his actions despicable and wrong. In fact, that knowledge formed a crucial part of the motive behind his actions, i.e. that through his alleged actions he hoped to become notorious infamous. So he's going back to what he was saying before. Like, there are other disorders that make you not have empathy, like, narcissistic personality disorder, antisocial personality disorder. And that doesn't matter because they have that intellectual knowledge that your actions are morally wrong. And he's kind of getting into this here. Like, how can he not appreciate the wrongfulness of his actions when, his goal, becoming infamous, depended upon understanding that. And he was, reasonably good at it too. We know what happened there. We know what the effect was. So he's acknowledging that his ASD did play a role in his actions, like all these bad things that had happened to him that led to him, forming all of these grievances and, just bottling the stuff inside for years, not fighting back, thinking about shooting all the people that had wronged him, getting back at everybody. That stuff probably wouldn't have happened if he didn't have ASD because, he wouldn't have had the deficits in social skills. He wouldn't have... maybe Tourette's too, like he wouldn't have had all those tics that made people think he was weird. He would have been a lot more likely to have had a normal life. He came from a good family, probably went to a good school. The rejection by women, like if you don't understand social cues, there's a lot of, nuances in, how dating works and, how to talk to women and how to, develop a relationship that just aren't going to come naturally to you. And it makes it a lot harder. And if I'm being perfectly honest, like, having ASD, having poor social skills is something that, most women really aren't going to have empathy for, that makes things a lot worse, And, if he hadn't spent all that time by himself, maybe he wouldn't have gone down this rabbit hole of looking up all these mass shootings and incel stuff and using it to make him feel better about what happened. Like, it was an essential element of this, path he went on. But did it make him do it? Well, Woodside doesn't think so, and I'm inclined to agree with him. So, from an overall psychiatric perspective and on the balance of probabilities, in my view, none of the thresholds branches relating to a finding of not criminally responsible due to a mental disorder would appear to be met in this case. More treatment recommendations that basically aren't going to matter. Okay. You can't call Woodside. And that's it. That is the last of the reports. No appendix, unfortunately. So that concludes my analysis of Alek Minassian's mental health reports. Now, some of you are probably asking why it is I've made these big, long videos giving him the attention that he repeatedly said he did this attack in order to get. Well, long before I made these videos, I asked myself a question. Why is it that, despite being one of the most infamous mass murderers in Canada, Alek Minassian has basically no fans, no fangirls who are in love with him, and no copycats? And I think a big part of it is that we have so much information about his life and what he was actually like, a great deal of which really isn't flattering to him. All of the information in these reports was discussed publicly during his trial. It was on the news, it was on social media, it was everywhere for everyone to see. It is now quite difficult to create any kind of romantic or heroic image of Alek Minassian that might be inspiring to people. We know too much. And I found myself thinking, maybe knowing too much is a good thing. Maybe it's a good thing if we dig up stuff like this, bring it out into the light, and show the world who people like him really are, as opposed to the image that they present to the media. Maybe that'll make people not want to do what they did. Maybe that'll make people say, hey, these guys are complete losers and screw-ups. I don't want to be like that. And maybe it'll help people understand how to stop young men from ending up like them. That's the hope I have, and that's one of the reasons I make videos about mass murderers. Justice Malloy believed the best approach was to not name people like him and starve them of the media attention they crave. Generally speaking, I don't agree with this idea, and I think it demonstrates an ignorance of how the internet works. The names of the perpetrators are always a Google search away, as is anything about them that might be out there. Those who seek to find people like that and emulate them will be able to find it all, just as Alek Minassian found Encyclopedia Dramatica, a website that most people have never heard of. New Zealanders made a concerted effort not to name Brenton Tarrant and to stop people from sharing his live stream, yet his actions continue to inspire others around the globe. Better, I think, to change the narrative rather than not creating one at all, because if we don't, less pleasant people will fill the void. Instead of talking about how dangerous and scary these people are, instead of playing into their hands by portraying them in the manner they wish to be portrayed, Let's talk about how weak and pathetic they are. Let's show everyone their lives as they truly were and reveal the true motivations behind their attacks, like with Alek Minassian. Never before have I seen a mass murderer whose life history was described so extensively and so publicly, and whose image was so thoroughly ruined by the crushing weight of reality. So this was my contribution to that. I realized that this is an unusual perspective and an unusual thing to dedicate one's time to. As far as I'm aware, I'm the only person on YouTube who has made a video about these reports. I was thinking of going over the judge's decision as well, but there are YouTube lawyers who have done a far better job of that than I ever could, so I will not. But I will offer my perspective on the question of his criminal responsibility, as an autistic person who has learned to see through the eyes of a neurotypical. I believe that Alek Minassian was criminally responsible for his actions. As Justice Malloy stated in her decision, to say this is to say that he had a rational brain and made a rational choice in doing what he did. Yet how could such senseless evil be rational? How could it be rational to choose death and a high score on Encyclopedia Dramatica over life, freedom, family, and a $70K a year programming job? This idea unsettled Westphal to the point that he believed it to be impossible. Surely if Alek Minassian had been rational, he would have chosen life. Well, having seen these videos and seen what you have of the kind of life Alek Minassian lived, I would ask you this. Is it rational to want to be part of society when you never really have been, when you've spent your whole life in the shadows being sent the message that society doesn't want or need you in it, that you don't matter? Is it rational to care about other people and how they feel when they don't care about you or how you feel? When they bully and reject you for things about yourself that you can't control? Things about yourself that other people either can't or won't help you with? And if your life, for as long as you remember, has largely been one of ostracization, humiliation, isolation, and hardship, is it rational to think that if you only keep trying it might be different, even though this has never worked? Is it rational to keep fighting this lifelong battle that you might never win? And even if you do, there will be no respect, no admiration, and nobody will care, because victory is just being normal, something everyone else can do without even really trying. And is it rational to respect society's rules and care about following them when this just brings you more pain? Be nice and polite, they say. Say all the right things. Do all the right things. Write all the right answers on your assignments. Don't fight back against the bullies. And be gentle, none of that toxic masculinity nonsense. This was how Alek Minassian lived his life, and the end result was that his pain and anger had no way to be expressed. There was no socially acceptable way for it to be given form. It grew within him for years, only to finally be shouted at the world in the form of a white van barreling down Yonge Street. He could have gotten help for his mass murder fantasies, of course. That was the right thing to do. He chose not to because he thought he could be arrested and put in jail, that the people who were supposed to help him might hurt him even more. And was that not a rational choice on his part? The neurotypical world, the rational world, offered him an environment in which he would never truly fit in which he might always be the underdog, always on the periphery, always alone, and always haunted by the specter of his failures to adapt to it. And so he rejected it. He embraced a new world, one which, much like a video game, has simple, concrete rules that can be understood by anyone, and in which victory is achievable by anyone. The mass murder scoreboard on Encyclopedia Dramatica, where the only thing you need to play the game is to hate society. And that was easy for him. Easier than trying to be a part of it. And so that's what he did. He chose death instead of life because it was easier. Yet he still lives. And even during the assessments, as he sat in jail, knowing he'd be there for decades until he died, he regretted nothing. The problem is not that Alek Minassian wasn't rational. The problem is that he was. The challenges he had, the life he lived, and the future he saw for himself made doing what he did seem rational to him. It was the path of least resistance and the quickest route to his dreams of success. And success by our standards was too challenging for him to achieve, so he chose a new set of standards, more suited to him, and chose to disregard ours. It is tempting as well as comforting to imagine that those who commit atrocities must have something broken in their brain, that there must be some critical part of their humanity that's missing. Yet many of these people are every bit as human as we are, with the only difference being that they've lived a life and been given a view of humanity that makes atrocities appealing. Had you been born in a different time and place, and among different people, you may very well have been a Nazi, a slave owner, an Islamist, or any number of things that would be repugnant to you. We'd all like to believe that our humanity is a result of our strength of character and our values, yet these things are shaped by outside forces to a degree that many of us would rather not admit. We may condemn Alek Minassian for lacking them, but is it really surprising that the life he lived and the environment he grew up in failed to produce either? I will not pretend to know if people can be born evil, but what I do know is that life makes evil far more appealing and far more rational for certain people. It doesn't have to. And I think this is a subject worth reflecting on. I will leave you all with that. I hope this video has been interesting to you all. That's all for now, folks.